And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network, here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center, in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. 90 Way Bossa Street, the naked city, the city of 1,000 stories. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and the mothership at coalitionradio.us. And as always, our all apolitical anti-billionaire baseball boys club Twitter feed at Pawtucket is home. Tonight we're going to focus, I believe, on one of the most important stories this year. We talk about being outrage porn free here. When I mention the Kavanaugh hearings, I don't for a moment, not in the very least, diminish both the importance on a governmental level, on a society level, and by definition, I would never, as father of 2 daughters, ever attempt to lessen the relevance of the claims raised by folks, by young women who were attacked so many years ago. At the same time, though, however, Rhode Island is at a crossroads. And while this issue is so important and seems to have taken over the airwaves and taken over the minds of Rhode Islanders, I'd like to remind folks, and by all standards it would appear that Channel 12 had ratings to the stars last night, which is a great thing. I'd like to remind folks, as important as that is to our daily lives, nothing will impact our lives more in the coming generations than what's happening right now in the gubernatorial race here in the state, back home in the state of Rhode Island. As always, a couple of ground rules on the coalition. We do the things a little bit differently here. I will never ever engage in handicapping an election. I don't care about polls. I don't care about fundraising. I don't care about party status. To me, that is simply irrelevant. At a time like this in the history of Rhode Island, we need ideas, we need leadership, we need focus. And all of that simply changes the subject from what's relevant to what, frankly, is easy, lazy media fodder. So this show, as always, as it has in its 4 years of its existence and going forward, will always seek to have the most important candidates here at the local level visit us in studio whenever possible, and at the same time spend an hour or so uninterrupted by commercial, uninterrupted by phone calls, uninterrupted by a host patter, or a host's sometimes overwhelmingly narcissistic obsession with whatever issue challenges him or her. We will attempt to deliver a clear, cogent conversation on the issues, without any hint of the madness that seems to occupy the body politic here in Rhode Island. So with that in mind, it is my great pleasure to have on the air someone that I've known for a number of years, who
sure have.
And this is a loving laughter. I've engaged, done battle with, shaken hands with, hugged, cursed, loved. In fact, I can think of really no other pairing in local politics from an activist standpoint. Again, I don't pretend to be an A-list player, but from an activist standpoint, which has been more compelling over the last 15 years?
Long time.
Long time. And of course, I'm talking about Joe Trillo. Joe Trillo, welcome, actually for the second time.
Pat, nice to be here. Nice to be here.
Joe, just a walk down memory lane in Coalition 1.0 when we were on fine radio station WPRO. Joe came on and talked about his then presidential candidate, Donald Trump. There was a gentleman on advocating for some guy named Kasich or whatever his name was. We've all, well, some guy named Kasich in Ohio.
Yeah.
I don't think he's around anymore, or he won't be soon. But this is really the first opportunity to focus on Joe Trillo. So what I'd like to do tonight, and we've got plenty of time, is start, kind of lay this out a little bit. The video that you folks did for the campaign a few weeks ago really grabbed the state. Because I think it was the first time they'd seen and for lack of a better term, the softer side of Joe Trillo. But it was very engaging, and it was, there's always a fine line when you do those, and you danced on the right side of it. It came across as compelling. It was interesting because you saw the other side of someone who's been a public figure and been beaming into our television, through our television stations and talk radio for a generation now. And I'd like to focus on that for the first few minutes and give folks an idea of where you are. And then we're going to spend some time literally just going issue by issue by issue, what's important to you, what your vision is for the state, and for the love of God, at this point in the year 2018, after having literally some of the same conversations going on 20 years now, what do we have to do to right the ship? But first of all, tell us about Joe Trill, the Rhode Islander, where you grew up.
Well, you know, it's funny because you brought up the story of the video, and I'll tell you how that came to be. This lovely lady here that's not on camera, Raina Smith, who, you know, she worked for WPRI TV. She was an on-air personality. She's worked for Ralph Marlis, Secretary of State's office. She's worked for WPRO. She came up with this idea. She's really got to know me over the past year, and she saw me do a lot of things that I'm sure no other gubernatorial candidate can do. Case in point, you're looking outside at one of the RVs that I have. I'm the guy that designed the electrical system that runs all the LED lights. There's a solar panel on the roof. The solar panel charges the batteries so that during the day that motorhome can be parked someplace all night. The lights will stay on. Once the daylight comes on, the lights go off. The solar panel charges the batteries. It's little things like that that she's witnessed me do. And she said, you know, I never saw anybody that can do all the things that you do in a given day. So she says, we should really do a video about that. And I said, oh, no, I don't want people to see some of the things that I do. And she thought it was very compelling. And she produced the video. And I got to tell you, Pat, I did it kind of tongue-in-cheek, saying, I don't know if I really want to get this out there. But once it was released, there was a tremendous positive response to it. And how do you tie that into being governor? You tie it into being governor because, you know, I use an analogy that I can do 98% of just about all trades. You name a trade, I've either done it, can do it, understand how to do it. You know, at this point in time, I can't do the heavy projects that I could have done when I was younger. But I know how they're done. I know the time constraints to do them. And when you're governor, you're constantly asked to spend taxpayer monies. It's either let's repair our schools, you got a roof leaking, you got a window leaking, you got a heating system that doesn't work. And when you know how to do the installation of all these things and you understand what it takes to make an HVAC system work, you know, I've installed air conditioning systems, I've charged them, I've repaired them, I've installed all kinds of heating systems. It makes life, sometimes it makes life more complicated because you have to have your nose in everything, as I do in my own life. But at the state level, the governor's talking about spending $250 million. Show me, it would be my response. Bring me on a tour of the schools, and don't give me the write-up that all these jokers that are contractors that are lined up to rip you off, Governor, that are lined up to rip the taxpayers off, and they're going to come up with these ridiculous estimates. You know, let's put a new roof on a school, $1.5 million. Show me why it needs a new roof, because a lot of roofs are repairable. A lot of roofs that are leaking in one place are easily repairable. I can go on a roof in 10 minutes and tell you this roof is shot. There's no way of saving it. But I can also go on a roof and tell you, just put a repair over here and over here. We can get another 10 to 15 years out of this roof. It's that kind of knowledge that I will bring to the governor's office, along with the political knowledge of 16 years in the General Assembly. One of the things that I like to explain about government is that, and you can appreciate this, I ran for office thinking, you know, I got a lot of great ideas. I'd like to bring some of my great ideas, some of my common sense ideas into government. And when you get in government, you realize that you can have the greatest ideas. It's like making a stew. You can have the greatest ideas, and you know what? You throw them in the stew. Wow, and that's looking like a great stew. And now you put some common sense in it because it's going to work for everybody, it's going to help everybody. Makes common sense. Add some logic to it. Wow, it's logical we do this because so many people are going to benefit from it. We got this great stew brewing, and you know what's going to mess it up? Politics. And everything you go to make in government, you have to throw politics in it because it's in it at every level. And the minute you throw it in the stew, it becomes complicated. And in many cases, the stew isn't worth serving to anybody. You just got to throw it away and start again. So I thought that just common sense and logic would work. 16 years of General Assembly taught me you need to understand politics. You need to understand how it works. And most importantly, you need to know who the players are, because you have two sets of players. You have the players above the floor. These are the elected officials that everybody knows, state representatives, state senators. Those are the players that operate above the scene. But then if you go below that floor, you got all these people that make those players move. You got all these players that hold these above the floor players to task. Why? They raise money for them. Those are the lobbyists. They raise lots of money. You got lobbyists that'll run a fundraiser for the Speaker of the House and raise them $50,000 like that. Yeah. Like that. And what does that mean? You think that lobbyist, when he wants the ear of the Speaker, can't get it like this? And he'll get it faster than all the other elected officials will ever get it, because he raised money for him. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with the governor's office. You got this governor right now, she's raised almost $8 million. Right. That's obscene money. She is so bought and paid for by every lobbyist, every special interest group. She can't function. It's like she almost needs permission to go to the ladies' room.
Yeah, that's and this show continues to point out, I think, one of the, probably in terms of dollar figures, not the largest, but to me one of the biggest, most fundamental conflicts of interest that exists is her continual acceptance of money from people who directly will benefit from the construction of the Burrillville gas-fracked power plant, and yet at the same time overseeing direct reports to her who will make the decision on whether it goes forward or not. I have a problem with that.
I do too. It's a real problem. And then you got a guy like Alan Fung. He's been just as bad. He hasn't raised $7 million, but he's raised $1 million. When you raise $1 million, let me give you an example. A Speaker of the House with everybody that wants his power can only raise $350,000 in a year. That's a lot of money. And everybody wants his ear. The governor, if she raises $1 million, everybody wants her ear. Uh-huh. But you got Alan Fung, who also went out and raised $1 million with everybody that thought he was the anointed one, and he was the guy that was going to beat Gina. They didn't think he was a good guy. They don't care. Lobbyists don't care if you're good. They don't care if you're smart. As a matter of fact, the stupider you are, the happier the lobbyists are, because it's easier for them to manipulate you. Mm-hmm. You know, I remember serving in the General Assembly, and we would hear talk about, let's make this guy a chairman. Not because he was good and qualified, right, because we could control him. And that's what goes on in government. I want to break that whole thing apart like a wrecking ball. I want to get in there and take my political expertise, use it to benefit the taxpayers, because you need to know who all the players are. If you go into war and everybody's dressed exactly the same, you don't know who the enemy is. Right. I go in there, I know who the enemy is. I know who they all are by name. I've been seeing them around for 16 years. And I know which one represents labor, which one represents the power plants, which one represents all these special interests. You got ones that represent the oil industry. You got a lobbyist for just about everything. And then you got the insurance companies that have their own lobbyists that work for them, of which Alan Fung was a lobbyist. That's what he was before he became mayor. So Alan Fung was a lobbyist who was going on behalf of the insurance companies to protect the insurance companies against the taxpayers. In his own city, the city has a consistency of flooding around Oak Lawn Avenue.
Right.
Nobody's ever fixed it. Alan Fung's never fixed it. The mayor before him's never fixed it. Bottom line is, it always floods when we have excessive water. It flooded 2 days ago again. People got flooded out of their houses. And what happens, the blame game starts. Oh, it's up to the state, it's up to this one. It's your city, Mayor. It's your city. And when you were a lobbyist for the insurance companies, you actually fought a bill that would have held the insurance companies' feet to the fire, that said you have to notify everybody in a flood district whether they have coverage or whether they don't. You fought against that because the insurance companies, they don't want you to know that. They want you to think you have flood insurance until the day comes you call them up and say, I've been flooded, and they say to you, oh, we're awful sorry, but you don't have flood insurance. I've been talking too much.
No, not at all. No,
I'm
in fact, you point out, institutional knowledge goes a long way, doesn't it?
It does. It does. It's everything today.
Where the bones are buried.
Where the bones are buried. It's like, you're going to put me in a fight. I want to know who I'm fighting against. I know who I'm fighting against. Alan Fung walks into that State House. He doesn't know anymore the new players that are there. He hasn't seen them. He's got to learn. And he's got to learn where they stand for. I know the reps and senators. I served with them. I know who the progressives are. I know the way they think. I know the individual people. And you know what? I got friends that are progressives. Even though I disagree with them on just about everything, I got to tell you, I have friends that are progressives. They're nice people. They just believe their insane beliefs, but they're nice people.
They're just confused at times.
Let me tell you something. I got a card here. This is what the progressives stand for. If this doesn't scare your audience, I don't know what will. They want to reduce wealth income and make it equal. They want to protect the right to choose. They want to repeal voter ID. Think of the nutsness of repeal voter ID. They're for undocumented persons, and they want to support undocumented people. They want to reverse climate change. They want single-payer health care for everyone, legalizing recreational marijuana, free public college for everyone, increase the affordable housing in Rhode Island, improve public transportation, and gun reform legislation is like a priority. If they could, they would take the guns away from every honest person that owns a gun. Because you're never going to get the guns away from the criminals. The only ones you stand a prayer to get away are the good guys that own guns.
No, it's funny, when you get out to the agenda, now, it's no surprise to you, I'm a libertarian. There's a couple of things there that we're actually on the same page for different reasons than our progressive friends. But when you look at the agenda, what's compelling to me is how much the Democratic Party looks to increase government, which directly acts in conflict with the stated goals that they've got on that card. Now, and I'll give you a perfect example. Affordable housing. You and I know that going out and buying apartment buildings and charging low rates for them doesn't work. And we could spend another show arguing why societally it doesn't work. Didn't work in New York City, didn't work in Boston, really pretty much doesn't work anywhere.
Right.
So at the same time, we're sitting here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Capitol here, and across the street from us is a loft complex that was financed by Providence, City of Providence, the broken financial mess that is the City of Providence, by essentially tax relief. So what these same Democrats do, and this is what's confounding, is they'll use the system to give tax relief to build wealthy expensive apartments, which takes available inventory off the market, skews the market in favor of wealthy, expensive housing that there's little or no demand for and can't exist without the said tax benefits, and then wonder why no one's building affordable housing in the free market. And at the same time is confused why the city of Providence is essentially, financially, a zombie city.
No, it's a zombie city for a lot of reasons, but one of the reasons is they've tied the hands of the police and they won't let them do their job with this Community Policing Act. But let me talk a little bit about the Democrats and why they do what they do. The first thing everybody does when they get elected, especially the Democrats, is think about how I can get reelected. In the case of the governor, Gina Raimondo, she figured that the easiest way she can get elected is by buying votes. So how do you buy votes? Well, you could probably go out to the polls and offer everybody $20 when they go in to vote for you, but that's illegal, Pat. But what she did, which was much more costly, is we're going to give away free college. Let's start with free college at CCRI, and then we can expand it to URI and RIC, all the state schools. We're going to give free college. Great concept. It works. You're going to buy a lot of votes with that. So she did it. And you did it the first year thinking, oh, well, the first year it's going to be maybe 10, maybe $15 million, $20 million. What's it going to be? Pat, this is going to end up costing the people, if it just stays at CCRI, $150 million in 10 years. Because here's what's going to happen. We're letting kids into these schools without any real qualifications. It's just an extension of high school. And we're going to have to, because so many are going now, we're going to have to build more schools, more classrooms, hire more teachers, and here we go building the bureaucracy, even build it bigger than it already is. But Gina Raimondo may get elected because of it. Now she wants to give away free pre-K. Great idea. If you have kids, small kids, and you work, and rather than put them in daycare, you can put them in pre-K. God, I'm voting for Gina Raimondo tomorrow. Who's paying the bill? Me and you. We're paying the bill. The taxpayers are paying the bill. Great idea. I'd love to do it if we had the money to do it, but it just doesn't work in a state that's in the financial trouble we're in. We're in financial trouble in good times. In bad times, we're really underwater.
Yeah, we have, Mike O'Reilly's been on the show a number of times. We have some of the worst pension plans in the nation, despite the fact that the market is what many argue is at the end of a historic bull market. So if we're in underwater, literally, in a bull market, what happens the first market correction, and where does that money come from? And the two words that I think Rhode Islanders need to fear most is special assessment. Because if you don't think for a moment that property taxes will have to reflect, or that this type of deficit, or that if the conversation will have to come up about a special income tax geared towards the city of Providence, which will be, I think, the final blow. Once that happens, you talk about a zombie state, or zombie city.
I think the city of Providence has been on the verge of bankruptcy, and it's been held together with bubble gum and Band-Aids for years. It's really in dire financial straits. You have a mayor that's got about as much business expertise as the cat walking down the street. He knows nothing about business. Nothing. And that's the unfortunate thing. Today we elect people. We elect people to jobs. If you were running a business and you hired people, you hire them on their qualifications. We elect people to run budgets in cities and towns and make budgetary decisions that they can't even balance their checkbook. Look, we've had members of the General Assembly on the Finance Committee that have been through bankruptcy. Are these the best minds to put in these places? So because you elect somebody, because you like what they promise, and they have no qualifications other than they've sold you a bill of goods. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this, but nothing to back it up. It's ridiculous. We do it every day, though.
Right, and there's been really, back when Don Carcieri was governor, I think one of the most brilliant things that he did at least temporarily, was to eliminate the aid to cities and towns. And because what that did was it forced each town to inflict upon itself some type of, I don't know, municipal maturity, some type of controls, some type of efficiencies. You all of a sudden couldn't just go back to the state, cry poor mouth, and ask for money. Now, we all understand that the urban core has got challenges that it faces that are unique, and that the suburbs, by definition, are wealthier and have more money. We get that. But at the same time, I can't remember the last time the word, I hope parents hold your hands over your children's ears for this, the term layoff was used in the city of Providence. I don't know in my adult life that I've lived here in Rhode Island, I've ever heard of a single layoff occurring in the city of Providence.
No, because the first thing politicians want to do when they get elected is they want to give jobs to the people that are either going to run against them, they have family members that could run against them. That's the capital that gets used up, and it's taxpayer dollars wasted. The city of Providence, I would bet you 50% of the people that work in the city of Providence, maybe more, have got their jobs going way back from mayor after councilman, and that's the way they get their jobs. Unlike private business, which hires people based on their qualifications.
Right. And so the city of Providence continues to lurch forward based on the largesse of other communities, and I believe where this is going to come to head is on this school bonds bill that Gina Raimondo is proposing. There are towns that, again, they may be wealthier, but they've watched their nickels and dimes, and they've done their own bond issues, and they've renovated their own schools. And you look at towns like Cumberland, which have done a fairly good job of financially monitoring their own system, have done their own bond, have done whatever they could. Right. Still, and understand, towns like Cumberland are not E.G. or Barrington. Cumberland has a mixture of economies and communities, and so, or you take a town like Warren, which has spent money, in conjunction with Barrington, but Warren has paid their fair share of that, and they've upgraded their school systems, and I should say Bristol. So you've got Bristol and Warren doing the right thing. And then these other communities are just going to show up, and we're all just going to write a check.
Well, you know what? It is the responsibility of cities and towns to maintain their schools. It always was. I remember the city of Cranston, back many, many years ago, I worked with the Democratic Council to raise bond money, and that was bonded to repair the schools because they needed to be schools. So it was the responsibility of the taxpayers of the city to put up and pay for the bond, and we did it. Now we're talking about the state getting involved in going back and repairing. You know what's going to happen with that $250 million? It's going to get chewed up between Providence, Central Falls, Pawtucket, and those are the cities that are going to get the lion's share of the $250 million. Well, it won't happen if I'm governor, I can tell you that. We're going to have some sort of a formula that's going to be fair to all the communities. I want to repair the schools. But one thing that Joe Trillo does, if I spend $1, I want to get $1.50 worth out of that dollar. I've done it all my life, and I'm not going to change just because I'm governor. I drive a hard bargain, I negotiate hard, and I'm cheap.
Nothing wrong with that, folks. If you're just joining us right now, independent candidate for governor Joe Trillo is joining us on the line. It's his second appearance on the coalition, his first time since we've joined the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center. Folks, this is the coalition, loud and proud, and as always, outrage, porn free. This hour is sponsored by the fine folks at Yacht Club Soda, yachtclubbottlingworks.com, Rhode Island's official soda. A boutique soda before we needed, well, we knew we needed boutique sodas. All natural ingredients, natural flavors. Folks, it's football season, you're tailgating, you're going to spend a lot of money, a lot of time having friends and family over these Sundays to watch our New England Patriots. You're going to serve the very best, so don't serve them that refinery soda for 89 cents in a plastic bottle from who knows what and where. Again, the finest soda on the planet. Their new flavor is grapefruit seltzer. It's a wonderful mixer with, shall we say, in honor of my friend Philippe and Jorge, a little Pernod. Or if you're just not into sugary sweet soda right now, well, it's a refreshing drink in and of itself. Again, Joe Trillo joining us live in the GoLocal studios. I just want to throw in a story because we mentioned Yacht Club. And this to me reflects really the arrogance of government as it exists here in Rhode Island. This past year, folks from both the House and the Senate attempted to pass what they called a sugary sweet soda tax. And if you read the
We've been
legislation,
trying to do that for years, but
right?
yeah.
Every year they step it up, and you know, these are stealth laws.
Yeah.
They keep coming back and coming back and coming back until one day.
Well, we think we need to be the parents of everybody. I mean,
Right.
that's how ridiculous it is.
So you've got this 100-plus-year-old institution, a gem, acting on its own, not asking for anything from the public, a significant taxpayer in the city of North Providence, a wonderful part of the local food culture, who finds out in 2 cases, and each time they found out when the bill was being heard, in one case by a friend who called them and said it was being heard that night, and the second case by myself the day before the bill was being heard. And the point being is that, number one, what type of community do we live in where a government, and this tax literally would put them out of business. It just, there isn't even any question that it would render them non-competitive in a challenging marketplace. What type of government just casually creates taxes which are, Death Stars for these local institutions who, by the way, employ people, and then takes, at the hearing that night, I got into a little bit with the Senate President when I complained that they just found out, and he pointed out much to his, because he took umbrage at that, and he pointed out, well, we published it. Okay, if this was a concern to you, we'd be having multiple hearings with stakeholders. Instead, this government wants to pass a nanny tax, which the intent of the legislation, as stated in the legislation, was to eliminate or minimize the consumption of soda. We've got local companies that make soda. Where does that leave them? In not such a good place. They found nothing wrong because they observed the letter of the law. Nothing wrong whatsoever in coming up with this in the manner they did, and it was only because we were able to generate overwhelming opposition at the very last minute that I think that it didn't pass this time around. What does that say about these people? How disconnected from reality are they?
They're very disconnected because the attitude is, we need to make decisions for you because you're incapable of making them. Now, I'm not going to tell you that there's not a lot of people out there that are incapable of making common sense decisions. But in the big picture, 99% of people are probably capable of making good decisions for themselves. Maybe 1 or 2% of the people should. But why do we need to make the decisions for 98% of the people just because 2% of the people aren't smart enough to make that decision? I just think it's ridiculous. We do it all the time with every one of our laws. It's all about, we're going to make the decision for you. We're smarter than you. We're making laws. And the other reason why a lot of laws get made, when you get elected in the General Assembly, you look every year at what laws can I get passed. If you don't get laws passed, especially the Democrats, they feel as though, if I can get 3 laws through this year, wow, pat myself on the chest, I did a good job. I never went in that building with an intent of passing laws. If anything, I would have loved to go and just take them off the books, one by one by one. I would pass laws that I thought were common sense laws. Like one of the laws I passed the last year I was there, I'm tired of going to a gas pump and having to hold a handle when all these handles have been modified. They have automatic shutoffs on them anyway, but we had a law on the books that said that the gas stations had to take the hook off the handles. Every other state you travel through, you could hook it. But you know what? When it's flu season, you gotta go hug everybody's hand that's got germs every time you wanna stand there and pump gas. So I took it off the books. Right now it's legal that gas stations can put that hook back on. A lot of them didn't do it because they don't even know how to do it. They've already taken them off. So you're seeing it at the new stations as they come in. That's the kind of thing that I would want to do. The other people want to control your life, run your life, and tell you what you can and what you can't do.
Let's go through some areas then. There are obviously, when it comes to challenges, as they would say, Rhode Island is a target-rich environment. You could walk outside the street right now and see 100 different areas of concern that just, it's a mess. Or if you're old enough to remember the old M&M's commercials, it's a chocolate mess.
It is
It's
a
just, it's everywhere and anything. So, you know, there are a couple of just right on the horizon that are blowing up on us. So first one, of course, is education. Two or threefold. Number one, you've got the physical condition of the buildings, which is obviously deteriorated. Number two, you've got a heightened security issue, and this is something that I think you can talk to obviously very well in the wake of the events of the last year or two. And then, of course, you've got the quality of the education itself. Rhode Island, by several accounts, has the highest poverty rate in New England, which, given our proximity to Boston, which is one of the wealthiest economies in the nation, is confounding.
Well, we went from 20% of our population of 1 million people needing some form of public assistance. In the last 10 or 12 years, we've taken that number up to 30%.
Excellent.
So how do we take it up? Let me explain to you how we got there. We imported illegal immigrants. We imported people that need to get taken care of because the Democrats have got this welcome mat up that says, come to Rhode Island. We've got some very liberal laws that will take care of people. So you can get on welfare quickly. You can get subsidized housing. You can get subsidized daycare. You can get food allowances, EBT card. It's real easy in Rhode Island. So a lot of people know that if they come here, it's going to be that much easier. So we've imported 10% more of our population that are on these subsidized rolls, and who pays for them? The taxpayers. You started off at education, and I got off into a tangent about that. Education is a major problem. We got a lot of problems in the school. I think one of the biggest problems, and I talked about this 20 years ago, and that is we need to put discipline back in the classroom. In the city of Providence, you have kids running the classroom. The teachers are afraid if they say or look at you the wrong way that they're gonna get fired and lose their jobs. We can't have teachers working in that kind of an environment. It's not productive. When I grew up, and probably when you grew up, because I'm a lot older than you, when I grew up, there was corporal punishment, and it was big time. I went to LaSalle, and one time I was in the band, marching in the band on the football field, and we were going up and down with these exercises. We were doing different maneuvers. I was a freshman at LaSalle, and I was kind of goofing off, and I forgot what we were doing, and the brother that was running the band at the time said, you know, you guys are going to get in line. There were like 50 guys in the band. You guys are going to get in line. If I hear another peep out of anybody, you're going to be very sorry. So being a little bit, you know, pushing the envelope, as I like to do, I said, peep. There were 50 guys, and the brother turned to the band and said, who said that? Who said that? So he said, if you don't tell me who said that, I'm going to march this band up and down the football field until it gets dark. This was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We could have gone till 6 or 7 o'clock. So I figured, hey, these guys are going to kill me for saying peep. I said it. That brother took me out of line, and he beat me up and down the football field. I took a beating like you can't imagine. But you know what? I learned a lesson. Don't say peep, and don't question his authority again. Mm-hmm. It was a hard lesson. I'm not saying we should go to that level. I'm telling you that because I think it's funny, but we've gone from that extreme to the extreme we are right now, where the kids go up to the teachers, they swear at them, they tell them off, they defy them. That kind of stuff needs to stop. If I'm governor, I want to put a director of education in that the first thing he's going to do is put discipline back in the classroom. Without discipline, you can't learn. The other thing is what we do for curriculum, and curriculum needs to be much more sophisticated than it is right now. In the city of Providence, you have a lot of children in school that do not speak English, and some of them that do don't understand it well. Today we have virtual classroom technology where we could fit it into a regular school, and virtual technology says if you speak Spanish or you speak Portuguese or you speak Chinese, we can let you learn in your native language while you're learning English at the same time, because each kid goes into a cubicle and they learn at their own pace. It's working very successfully in a couple of the schools in Providence, and that could be incorporated in the public schools. So there's a lot of things we can do to make schools more efficient. You talk about efficiency and wasting money. I would be remiss if I don't pick on one of my pet peeves, and that is DOT. We are repaving sections of Route 95 that really don't need to be repaved. A lot of them could be filled with an asphalt liquid that would fill them and solve a lot of the problems. But why are we repaving them? We're repaving because they look good when they're repaved. And Gina Raimondo wants the roads to look as good as she can, but she's got them all pulled apart all over the state all at one time. Bottom line is we're spending hundreds of millions of dollars repaving roads that don't need to be repaved when the city and town roads are falling apart. What I would have done if I was somebody that got along with the Trump administration, Gina Raimondo, and our entire congressional collection of geniuses, they don't get along with the Trump administration. I would have gone and I would have asked them for a one-time 2-year waiver. All the money you're going to give us as the federal government to repave all of 95, some of it needs to be repaved. In 195, let us take all that asphalt and let us put it into the local city and town roads and let us repair them. We've done that in the past. We've got waivers when we did the Medicare waiver under Governor Carcieri. We were the first state to go to the federal government and say, let us keep people in their homes. Let's give us a waiver so we don't have to send them to nursing homes and incur that much money that the federal government is paying through Medicare. Give us that one-time waiver. They gave it to them. It's stuck. Other states are getting it now, and it's become a normal thing for states to go and request. So there's a lot of things that we could be doing. But again, you need a relationship with the administration in Washington.
Well, now, okay, so I want to get to one thing on education, and I want to talk about that relationship. You were in the House when the Race to the Top money.
Yes.
We went through that whole, I call it statewide, almost the entire state got behind that effort. Mm-hmm. We saw tens of millions of dollars drop down into our education system.
Yep.
From the Race to the Top.
Yep.
By many accounts, that ended up being really wasted on bureaucracy and consultants. What's your take on that? Because it strikes me that almost no matter what's given to us, we just can't seem to have nice things.
Well, I think the money got squandered. A lot of the money got squandered. A lot of the money went to the city of Providence, mm-hmm. and it just got squandered. I think that the Race to the Top had the basics of a good idea, but it wasn't delivered well to the teachers. Anytime you want to move something in education, you can't just have one person, I don't care how smart they are. Deborah Gist was a smart lady, there's no question about it. This director of education, he's a smart guy. But you can't go and just demand that the teachers are going to do this. You need to have ideas formulated from all the teachers. Now, you can't listen to 10,000 people, the teachers. But you can listen to their representatives from each school, from each class. You can weed it down where you're able to get the input of what would work in the classroom. That's never been done. We need to start to listen to the teachers and see where it goes in terms of direction. Allow them to have input if we're going to make education work.
The relationship with the federal government, obviously at this point in time, to say that the relationship, and I'm not looking to comment on the Trump administration, but given the way things work now, and obviously I want to change them, but given the way things work right now, a disproportionate share of the income that comes to the state in the form of taxation is funneled through any one of 100 federal programs. And right now, there are those that argue that we're at war with our own federal government. What needs to happen there, and what's your perspective on that?
You should never be at war with your federal government, whether you like them, whether you don't like them, whether you stand with them, whether you don't stand with them. The bottom line is they need you. You need them, excuse me. The bottom line is you need them. And without them, you kind of cut off your nose to spite your face. It's just stupid. You know, let me say this. I was Trump's campaign chairman for Rhode Island, and while I think he's made some great accomplishments on the national scene, I think the tax credits that he's put out there have stimulated the economy. The economy's soaring. The stock market is going through the roof. People are spending money. The job rate is way down. The minority community is experiencing the absolute maximum employment that it's ever experienced. I think we're doing well on a national scene and even an international scene. With that said, there are things with his style that I take exception to. One of the things that Donald Trump did that was counterproductive to his mission was you don't pick a fight with U.S. senators that you need to pass your agenda. You just don't do it. If I'm governor and I go into the State House and I pick a fight with the Speaker of the House and the Senate President and I keep hammering at them and the members that are in the room over and over, that's counterproductive. I'm going in there as an independent, but I also know I need these people to work with me to accomplish my agenda. I can't do it alone. And I think that's the thing that I would fault Trump for the most. It's created a monumental amount of problems for him that weren't necessary.
Okay. The Rhode Island cries out for the big idea. What's that sort of one break glass, you know, in case of emergency idea? What's that Hail Mary, silver bullet, whatever? You know, a few years ago, I thought that the Center for Freedom and Prosperity, in conjunction with a few of the national tax study groups, a gentleman by the name of Joe Henchman, who I know came to the state as vice president of the Tax Foundation, and one of the things they advocated for was the elimination, or at least, if not, the near elimination of the sales tax. It strikes me that if you wanted to instantly put fuel on the fire of the economic engine of Rhode Island, which is a state which is so dominated by, quite frankly, let's be blunt, retail is one of the few things left here. Small retail, small restaurants, small businesses. What do you think needs to be done with our tax structure? Is the sales tax the first way you step? I mean, where would you go?
Pat, I don't think there's any one silver bullet. I think the sales tax is definitely part of the montage of what you need to do. It's very important. We are a stupid state to be so close to Massachusetts and have our sales tax rate higher than Massachusetts. It's just stupid. You heard all the border communities. You heard everybody. You heard the automobile dealers. You just heard everything. It just doesn't make sense. So what we need to do is we need to first get equal with our neighboring states. Then we need to get under equal so that we're 0.5 point less and strive to keep going down. As I find more money in government, when you want to lower the sales tax 1%, it's $140 million. So to say you're going to get rid of it from where it is right now, it's like $1.2 billion, $1.3 billion. Anybody that tells you that running for governor is just lying to you. It's not possible. But if we begin to live within our means and we change the way we operate in a lot of places and we make our government more efficient, you know, about 10 weeks ago, I had dinner with Governor Sununu from New Hampshire. And Governor Sununu was sitting with me, and first thing he says to me is, "What's your budget?" I said, "Well, our budget's about $9.6 billion. He said, "You know what I would do with $9.6 billion? He said, "My budget is $6.6 billion. He said, "I would have $3 extra billion. That's a third of my budget. I could do all kinds of programs." And New Hampshire's a successful state with its budget. So I would tend to agree with him. But in order to do that, you got to get in there with a scalpel. You got to go into state government and you got to carve out. There's departments in state government that are doing redundant things with different departments. There are departments that are just sitting on their hands because what the assignment was for their particular job, it's no longer needed. Take those people and move them into a job where we need more help, like the Registry of Motor Vehicles. Registry of Motor Vehicles is another disaster. I would clean it up, do whatever it takes to clean up the Registry of Motor Vehicles. The first thing I would do is start with opening one night. If one night doesn't work, open 2 nights. And we got to pay whatever's necessary. You can't have people wasting a day out of their life to stand in line at the Registry of Motor Vehicles. Recently, I bought a vehicle. As a matter of fact, that's the vehicle outside. I bought it in Connecticut, and I had to go to the Connecticut Registry of Motor Vehicles. I was in and out of there in an hour. Why? Because they have a reservation system. You can do it online. You make a reservation. They will give you a window of 30 minutes to an hour. You show up. You have a number. They call your number, and you're done with it. You know, we could do that. We could have a reservation system.
Well, let me ask you to take it one step further, and this ties into the whole UHIP issue as well. As you know, as I made public, my day job, I work in the automobile industry.
I know.
I happen to work in the fleet side, so I've registered vehicles in excess of 40 states. So and people in just about every state complain about their registry. It's just one of those things. But I can say from a professional perspective that out of the 40 states that I do business in, we are the worst. And that's not from the Dr. Doom. that's not from the
Grim Reaper.
Thank you, the Grim Reaper. That's simply a reflection of a professional reality. What does it take for me to get a company vehicle, a multinational company's vehicle, registered in Rhode Island versus New York, Massachusetts? Interestingly enough, New Hampshire is one of the easiest. You know, similar landmass, actually larger landmass. Similar population, larger, lower taxes, and it's quite frankly, they use a model where you actually go to town halls and do it, and the town gets a little piece of the action. Towns love it.
Makes sense.
People are happy to see you. Different reality completely. But it reflects a bigger picture, because let's bring in the 4 ugliest letters in Rhode Island now, which are UHIP. We've got a state, one of the tiniest states in the nation, we love to brag about it, that seems obsessed with creating its own unique legacy. People are waving. Its own IT universe, which speaks directly to the type of empire building that's so wrong with government in general. Because you don't hire one person, they need an assistant, they need a department, they need, and then all of a sudden you've got this, while at the same time, quite frankly, you have none of the competitive pressures, like for example, in the industry you came from, your industry, boy, talk about eating their own when it comes to the technology involved in fire protection and personal safety. Oh my God. I have customers in that business. It's an extremely competitive,
very competitive,
bare knuckle business. People are out innovating each other every day.
But it's also a technology changing business. It's unbelievable how quick it changes.
So why, and I'm going to go back to the medical cannabis testimony, and I talk about this often on this show, but interestingly enough, this was about 2 years ago, she who must not be named decided that it was a really great idea to tax people who were sick and dying. Puts off that issue for a second. And I remember actually bursting out in laughter when the head of the Department of Health talked about, the governor was going to institute a taxing system which was going to be based on tags, similar in a sense to a cigarette tax where you sell the tags onto the plants. And the head of the Department of Health said, we're going to invent a spiffy, her words, spiffy new computer system that'll track the tags. And I actually laughed out loud. And in my testimony, which I have on tape, thank God, all right? I pointed out, this is 2 years ago, that UHIP was a burgeoning disaster, and we as a state are not big enough, nor do we need to be in the IT business. Why not just, and this is my idea, I'm going to pitch to you, my elevator pitch, simply get together with a half a dozen other states of similar size, Delaware, New Hampshire, Vermont, come up, go to Amazon, ADP, you name it, IBM, and say, you know what, let's build a system and charge us on a transactional basis. Let's get out of the registry of car business. Cars need to be registered. Okay, I'll give you that. Even as a libertarian, I'll give you that for the time being. Cars need to be registered. We need to track insurance. Why, in the name of God, do we have to invent our own unique system at the cost of hundreds of millions of dollars of taxpayer money to do so? It's simply, we outsource a lot of our retirement plan. So it's not a question of privacy.
Because we've built the laws that say, let's talk about registration. They say that if your inspection sticker is expired, you have to be notified. If your insurance, you didn't pay it, we want to revoke your registration. So it requires all these tie-ins. We need to tie every insurance company into the registration system so that if you don't pay your car insurance this month, bingo, the computer's linked to that insurance company, it's linked to the registry of motor vehicles, and you get a notice from the registry of motor vehicles, your registration has been suspended. So it's all of these mandates that have been put out there that create this complicated computer system as opposed to just a boiler room system. And this is the problem with UHIP. The UHIP computer system, the program that operates it, it's not a hardware problem, it's a software problem.
Right.
The software that operates it is incorporating all the mandates that we have that are unique. If you have this disease and we're forced to cover it because of a mandate that comes out of the State House that's been legislated, it's got to be incorporated into the program. If you want to check with the death records to make sure that we're not paying for benefits after somebody dies, that's got to be linked. It's actually got to be linked to all of the other states because we have people that are in the system that are living in Florida, that are living in other states, and they're collecting checks from Rhode Island. So we want this massive program that's like the super brain linked to everything. And I used an analogy last night in the debate. Visualize this huge brick wall with 250,000 bricks in it. And that represents all the people that are collecting some sort of public assistance in this system. And then you add another 100,000 bricks representing all the states and all the connections that we try to do. And we built this huge system custom to Rhode Island for its needs. And we built it on site, and we put it with mortar that turns to jelly. The bricks are crooked. The mortar is deteriorating, and the bricks are popping out all over the place, and you have Deloitte coming in saying, I can fix it. And they're patching it up here, the bricks, and then they go over here, and they patch it up here. And what's happening is they're chasing their tail. What should have been done is to go in and build a basic database going back to what we had originally that we shut down. Build a basic database of this is Mrs. Jones. She's qualified to get EBT for so much. She's qualified for subsidized housing. She's in the system. We have her address. We haven't certified that she's not living in Delaware or she's not living in New York. We don't know that yet. Put her in the system. She was in the system before. Build a basic database for these 250 to 300,000 people. Build it. And now go and build the add-ons where they could be disconnected without messing up the whole system and lose everything that's in the system. That's what needs to be done. Can we do it right now with the existing UHIP problem? I don't know, because I'm not working with it, and I'm not a computer programmer. I don't go to that level of computers. I can put the hardware together though. But we need to go in, look at it. So what the first thing I would do as a governor is I would bring in some sophisticated system engineers that are able to write computer software, have them evaluate where we are. Can we extract a basic database that's secure? Because we can't do it right now. We're not paying hospitals. We're not paying daycare centers on time. We're not paying people that need to be paid, that need the services. So we've really messed up everything. We've put healthcare providers out of business. We've almost put hospitals out of business. And it just continues to get worse every day.
Why, in your mind, I mean, we all agree that the governor has gone, as we like to say in the coalition, gone turtle on this. It strikes me that a year ago, while she had plenty of time left in her term, let's look at it strictly from a political perspective. Forget about doing the right thing for the sake of doing the right thing. Let's just go. We don't want to get crazy here, right?
Right.
So
don't get carried away.
Yeah, a year and a half ago, when it was clear that this was not beyond blowing up. This ship was sinking quickly. Why not simply take that moment and draw the line in the sand and say, okay, let's stop?
Because she doesn't know any better. She's a woman that has more degrees than a stove. Yet she can't solve a problem that's not written in a book. Right. And a lot of life's problems, a lot of government's problems are not written in a book. You need to be able to have the skill set to go in, dissect the problem. All my life, Pat, I've been inventing things. I got U.S. patents in my name for devices that I've invented and sold all over the country, all over the world. I've got a mind that you show me something that's not working. Even if I don't understand it, I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to fix it. Somehow, some way, I'm going to figure it out and I'm going to fix it. And I've done it in everything in my life. From financial things to mechanical things to construction things. I can get it done. The governor doesn't have that skill set. Certainly Alan Fung doesn't have that skill set. It's a unique skill set. It really is.
No, I agree with you 100%. You know, it's funny because in my prior life, I fixed things. As I like to say before I went into sales, I used to have skills. I improved the quality of people's lives. But you have to, it's an innate capability to walk into essentially all hell breaking loose and to let your training, not just the technical training as it applies to maybe that particular industry, whether it be HVAC, electrical, contract, whatever. It's your ability to stop and you almost go into a second state where all you're thinking about is problem analysis and how to step through that. I think you're right. You either have that skill or you don't. I don't think it's something that can be trained. And people who have that skill often aren't self-aware about it until one day they wake up like, how did I just do that?
Let me tell you how long I've had it. When I was in the 6th grade at St. Pius in Mount Pleasant, up in St. Pius is in Mount Pleasant. 6th grade, 5th grade, I was running all the technical stuff in the school. We had movies, which in those days were movies on film. I would set up the movies, the speakers. We would have little vaudeville acts once or twice a year. I would set up the little communication links with the earphones. In those days, nothing was wireless, so we would run the wires around. I would run the spotlights and set up the follow spot, run the lights on the stage, the curtains. I was doing that in the 5th grade. By the time I was in the 7th grade, the nuns, we had a custodian at St. Pius who had been there for many years, who was a great guy, but occasionally he liked to tip a few the night before, and he didn't come in the next day. So when he didn't come in, they knew that I had an uncle. In those days, we had the big buildings all had boilers in them that you needed a boiler guy to run the boiler. You had to stoke the boiler, throw the coal in it, or run the burners, whatever. It was all manual. Bottom line is, my uncle was a boiler operator, and they knew it. I don't know how we got into the conversation of it. Bottom line is, they would come and get me when he didn't come in, and I would run the boiler. Tell you a funny story. So one day we got a test. And I'm in the boiler room, and I know the gauges. You got to watch the pressure level, make sure it doesn't get too high, let the steam out if it gets too high, or you just cut down on the burn or cut down on the coal that's going into the boiler. So this day, I didn't study for this test. I didn't study for a lot of tests, but this was one particular test. I didn't want to take it. I knew if I went home that night, anyway, I went and I told the principal, sister, I'm really concerned about this boiler right now. The pressure is way beyond what it should be. I really think we should get everybody out of the school because it could be dangerous. She rang the bell like a fire drill. We got everybody out of the school, closed the school for that afternoon. I went home, I studied, and I took the test the next day. But you know what? They shouldn't have had me running the boiler.
Oh, my goodness.
So, but what I'm getting at is, I've been blessed with this skill set to know how to do a lot of things, and it's served me well. I built my own TV studio. We're in a studio here. You've never seen my studio. It's a 3-camera, 4 huge monitors that size, with a control board, production facility, and I do my own video editing. I have done it for years. So I understand how to do stuff at that level. One of the things I never did, any business I went in the alarm security business. I had to understand how to do every job in that business as well as anybody that worked for me. I went into marine products manufacturing. We were making products. I would design the product. I would make the jig that would make the product or jigs to make the products. And I would, so that I could teach somebody, this is how you make this particular product. We were making static dissipators to prevent boats from getting hit by lightning. I made the tools to make the product. So that was the manufacturing end of things. And then I was in the retail business, pianos, organs, musical instruments. So it wasn't enough for me to just sell a piano. When I got into the piano and organ business, I learned how to tune pianos, how to completely take them apart, rebuild them from nothing. You could pull a piano apart in front of me and give me 2 hours and I'll put that whole piano back together for you. Tuned, I would learn how to rebuild them, how to change the felt on the hammers, how to do everything. Then I learned how to refinish them because the piano, we would take in older pianos, we needed to refinish them. We hired a finisher and he taught me how to refinish pianos. Then I was in the organ business and I learned how to do all the repairs on these big church organs. You know, I knew how to do all that. So I've always had this inquisitive mind. It served me well in business because if somebody quit that was my organ service man, I knew I could go in it. Not that I wanted to step in and do it, but I knew I could go in and do it. It's like the guy that runs a restaurant and hires a chef, but he doesn't know how to cook. He's at a distinctive disadvantage. If he loses that chef, he's in trouble.
The one area that you and I are probably going to agree to sort of disagree to kind of come back and
come on, disagree with me on something.
Well, first of all, legalization. Okay, let's go right at it. Legalization of marijuana.
Okay.
All right. My point. Effectively, marijuana is legal now.
It is.
You know, for all
I'm not going to disagree with
for
you.
all intents and purposes.
Anybody that wants to get a card that says you need medical marijuana
Well, I'll take it in one step
can
further.
go there with a toe ache and get it.
Anyone who wants to, even without the card, and get marijuana right now, cannabis, can go and get it,
Yeah, but
including students.
Not legally.
Not legally, but
Yeah.
effectively. They
Yeah, I agree.
And in a city like Providence, where law and order, I mean, this is the Wild West here. Hear me out on my points. First off, I believe the war on drugs at this point is a failure. I don't advocate for people to use cannabis. I simply respect an adult, emphasis an adult, right to make that choice to do so, as long as they accrue no harm to anyone else. In other words, they don't drive stoned, they don't operate heavy equipment stoned, just in very much the same manner as alcohol.
I agree with you on that. I agree with you. The only difference is if you're driving stoned, we don't have a test to test how stoned you are. The way we can tell an alcohol level, we can't tell a stoned level. When they come out with a test that a cop on the beat can give you on the spot without having to take your blood and do everything else, when we come out with a test like that, I will support it going out on the ballot, and I know it's going to pass.
All right, so I'll hold to that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I've said that every time I've been asked about it.
medical cannabis. We have one of the better programs in the country. Interestingly enough, there is, without getting into the governor and her family and some of the other relationships, there are clearly conflicts of interest in terms of expanding on it. Because right now, the point of medical cannabis was to take people, ill people, sick people, off the streets and not force them to buy at the street level, and an attempt to create some sense of order to it. With a lockdown on how many programs there are, and how many places they can go to buy it, regardless of how you feel about the approval process, it's created a market. It's created basically a monopoly for a handful of connected individuals. The state, ironically, for a lot of people who supported the legalization of cannabis, they thought that legalization of medical would be a great first step. Unfortunately, what it's led to is that some of the most significant barriers to legalization are the people right now who have monopoly. There are, whether it be cannabis, whether it be casinos, whether it be this or that, there are people with monopolies, effective monopolies all over the state. And it hampers opportunities for small business to be involved. It creates artificially high prices for citizens. When is the state going to just get out of these businesses, stop it? And let, for example...
Well, I think the problem, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I think the problem is the state wants to tax it. And the only way they're going to be able to tax it is if they control it. Mm-hmm. And the only way they're going to control it is if they give out licenses to individuals who they're giving specific economic opportunities to, mm-hmm. and denying other people the right to be able to do it. It's almost like you become a drug company when you're able to do medical cannabis. It requires it to be tested, it requires it to be at a certain level, mm-hmm. and it requires certain people to do it. I happen to know a guy who's running one of these big grow centers that's legal. He's making money hand over fist. Hand over fist.
He's got very little competition.
Very little competition. The governor had put out a proposal to put 12 more on, and I think it would be too many to control, but I would be in favor of adding some more licenses out there for growers, mm-hmm. to make it more competitive. The price was supposed to come down. The price hasn't come down. You can probably still buy it on the street illegally, cheaper than you can buy it at a grow center. Right. That wasn't supposed to happen.
Right, and the stuff that's out on the street is unsafe.
Yeah.
Very often it's adulterated with some very dangerous product.
Right.
The Attorney General's office. Now, you're not running for Attorney General. Actually, the gentleman running for Attorney General, by all accounts, is an honorable alternative to perhaps some of the challenges that we face, particularly in the last...
It would appear that he is.
Right. Are you ready to go work hand in hand with him to for once and for all, to have this sort of cathartic, let's just dig up all the bones, let's take a, guys like me, what do you always call me?
The Grim Reaper.
The Grim Reaper. Guys like me lose a lot of their traction if for once and for all, this state just dug up all its bones, dug up all the other things, and just went at it for a year or two and cleaned house. All of a sudden, you lose a lot of that cynicism. Clearly, regardless of how you felt about the stadium, Fake Towers, this, that, add asterisk 38 to just about anything in this state, all right? And you're going to develop an instant cynicism. Is it time for the state, will you work with the new Attorney General in revisiting, even if it has no legal implications, revisiting 38 studios?
Oh, one of the things I'm going to promise you, I was there on the House floor when we were lied to appropriate money that was able to be lent to the 38 studios investors. We had no idea that that's what was done. We can argue about that all day long. Right. We had no idea. We were lied to by the House Finance Chairman, mm-hmm. who never had really lied to us at that level before. You go to him, you ask him, what's the money going to be used for? The money's going to be used to benefit a variety of small businesses. It's going to be a new economic development program, and we're going to implement it through the Economic Development Corporation. Why wouldn't I support that? I'm a small businessman all my life. I'm going to support things that are going to help small business. I got a whole small business plan when I'm elected governor. But the bottom line is, I want to know who was at the bottom of this, who benefited from 38 studios. It was a dirty, filthy deal, and whoever it was, I want them exposed. This governor already promised an investigation. She said, oh, you know what, it's going to cost $1 million. Governor, you just blew $1.5 billion of taxpayer money. Not $1.5 million, $1.5 billion of tax money. You won't spend $1 million to get to the bottom of this so we can shed this negative image, because I think the state is owed that explanation. And I promise you, I am going to hopefully conduct it with this new Attorney General. He's pretty much elected right now because the Republicans didn't put anybody against him. I think he's an honorable guy. He is running as a Democrat. That gives me a certain amount of caution, but I think he's that honorable. When you look at the two-party system in Washington, they're disgusting. They're absolutely disgusting how dysfunctional and how they can't get together and work together. So again, that's one of the reasons why I'm running as independent. I'm totally disgusted with both parties.
Which leads me to the final area I wanted to talk about. And for those just tuning in or those picking up at later on when this is rebroadcast on Facebook and across social media, joining me in studio is Joe Trillo. This session is being sponsored, of course, by our good friends at Yacht Club Bottling Works. To me, the darkness lies within the Commerce Corporation. Okay, I'm a libertarian. You're a small business Republican. Obviously, we share similarities. We have certain philosophical differences.
I think you and I agree on more things than we disagree on. The problem is when you don't agree with me on stuff, you want to annihilate me. So you need to be able to work a little better with people that you disagree with. See, I learned that for 16 years.
But I'm an activist, not an elected official. And the chances of me...
This is true.
But look at it this way. I think there's one thing you and I can, no matter what, can agree on tonight. Both you and I, with respect to our careers, well, no, you're going to continue to rise. Me, I've probably reached my plateau in terms of elected office, which is to say I have none.
Well, I always said you should run for office. I've said that to you a million times going back 15 years ago, because until you get in there and you see the mess it is, and you see how difficult it is to change something, because like I said in the beginning, you throw common sense, you throw logic in it, you got a great idea, you put it in the stew pot, and then you add politics to it, and you've completely contaminated it. When you experience that firsthand, you're going to say, by gosh, Joe Trillo was right.
Well, and I probably said that a few times already, but the Commerce Corporation,
which I would change the name back to Economic Development.
See, the problem I have with the Commerce Corporation right now is that the current, let's just say Governor Raimondo effectively runs it, is writing checks left and right and left to virtually anybody to show some sort of economic pulse with no long-term commitments to the state. And effectively, in several situations, forcing taxpayers to subsidize their own competition, whether it be a printing company, whether it be a baseball, whatever. We're writing checks left and right and left to people. Why don't we just focus on, and I understand your point about having this being a collaborative, I'll use that term loosely, a collaborative process. Doesn't it make more sense ultimately to create an environment where there's equal play for everyone, where people use their own risk capital to start businesses, they don't leverage their connections with the authorities, they don't use their inside connections, they're not donating capital to campaign contributions to people in the hopes that they'll get that sweetheart loan. Right now there is allegedly before, a very large travel agency here in the state is coming before the Commerce Corporation at some point in time in the near future for what I call the Pawtucket Paw Sox Participation Award, which is supposedly going to be a $1 million grant. Now, why do we as taxpayers have to give a $1 million grant for, call it whatever you want, for a business that already exists, is profitable? Why not just focus on creating a level playing field. I know that sounds, to a lot of people, that sounds hopelessly naive, but that's what I fight for.
Well, I agree. That's one of the things I want to do. One of the things I want to do is I want to take some of this throwaway money that the governor's been throwing at these big corporations to bring them into Rhode Island, and I want to have an economic opportunity program for people who would never normally qualify for a loan. These are people that have great ideas, good ideas, and they can demonstrate a certain amount of diligence that they're willing to put into starting up a business, and with a little bit of capital in a loan program, very low interest. Loans, I'm talking $5,000, $10,000, $15,000, maybe $25,000, depending upon the idea. Have some sophisticated people make these decisions. We could lend out to 700 people in 1 year $20 million. And these would be an opportunity for 700 startup businesses, of which maybe 600 won't survive. But the ones that will survive will contribute to our economy. They'll grow, and we'll help them grow, and they'll be very successful to our state, as opposed to going out and spending $25 million or $100 million to bring in 100 jobs.
And my final thought for the night is, I get that. I understand the logic and the reasoning behind it, but at the same token, because some will get it and some won't, and you're taking tax dollars from people, we use the term, and obviously there's a little bit of hyperbole here, but it's true. You know, we don't get to volunteer to pay taxes. It isn't a charitable deduction here. We have to. So people who have businesses who are not the benefits of this governmental largesse ultimately receive, have to compete against people who are. And so take that money, whether it be...
Well, I would also want to help existing businesses. And if they qualify with a bunch of things, I would want to help existing businesses.
But here's a great way to do it, and I know you get this, and we'll just kind of let this hang, because this is a conversation you and I have been having in one form or another for probably 15 years now. But rather take that money and take the corporate franchise tax, the minimum, which at one point was $500, I think it's down to what, $4 now or something, and make that a $25 fee, which will cover the cost of paperwork. And if ultimately you will instantly put $300 or $400 back into the hands of all sorts of small businesses, and the amount of tiny businesses that left the mortal coil after all of a sudden it became too much money to keep that tiny business alive will explode again.
I agree with you on some things. What I would do with that corporate minimum tax is I would base it on the number of employees you have in your company. So we're not going to let off a company that's got 500 employees to pay $25. I understand you want to treat them equally, but they should have a bigger burden to help the little guy. It's the little guy that I really want to help. Not that I don't want the big guy there, but I want to help the little guy so that the little guy actually could pay nothing.
Okay.
The little guy would pay nothing. You have 4 or 5 employees, you're a little company. You shouldn't pay anything. You got 5 to 10 employees, so you pay $50. You know what I'm saying? So it would be a sliding scale.
All right. In the last couple of minutes, essentially, because we're going to cut this part out, and we're going to put the whole interview will be up unedited. But if you could just spend a couple of minutes and make a statement to the people of Rhode Island, for whomever is watching this, kind of give us the elevator, the Joe Trillo elevator pitch.
Well, there's so many things that I want to do and say. To put them all together in a couple of minutes is difficult. I want to reform education. That's important to me. I think one of the biggest things that's the most important to me is I want to cut taxes. And I want to cut all taxes. But I want to specifically go after the taxes first that are forcing people to move out of the state. And that's the income tax, the tax on pensions. We're taxing military pensions. We need to stop doing that. We need to lower our sales tax to become at least initially competitive with Massachusetts. So taxes are one of my priorities. The other thing I want to do, you might like this, I want to eliminate car inspections. Car inspections are something that 31 states have already eliminated. Only 19 states still do them. What it does is it puts you in the hands of the guy that's doing your inspection. It's in his best interest. He's actually losing money to do the inspection. So it's putting you in his hands, and if he doesn't write you up for something that maybe you could have got another year out of, shock absorbers or tires or something, a muffler system, he's writing you up for it, and in many cases it's hurting people unnecessarily, and it could save them money if we didn't have car inspections. Again, 31 states don't have it. Big states like Florida got rid of it. Florida's got a population of 30 million people. So why do we always know more than everybody else? The cars today are built much more sophisticated than they were back 50 years ago when we needed it. The things that fail, that really cause a problem, we can't test for. We can't test for the condition of your master cylinder. If your master cylinder fails, your brakes don't work. But if your brakes are failing, they can still work. You know what I'm saying? So if you have brake shoes or brake pads that need to be replaced, you're going to know you need to replace them because they're going to start to squeak. There's just a lot of things. People are being ripped off every day by mechanics who are doing inspections that's in their best interest for them to write you up for stuff. I want to remove regulations. I want to remove regulations at the state level, and I'd like to go down to the local level. But one of my pet peeves is we have these legislators who their claim to fame is how many laws they can pass. And every time they pass a law, it gets assigned to a different department of government to enforce. And when they do that, the law says that you have to do this in the law, but we give the departments the ability to promulgate rules and regulations that they feel necessary to achieve the ultimate satisfaction of the passage of this law. I want to eliminate that because that's created a ton of regulations. And I'm trying to look at the clock here and stay on time so that we can end in the next 3 minutes because I'm pretty much running out of gas.
I do this for 3 hours.
I want to shrink the size of government. I want to strengthen the laws against animal abuse. We've got people that are abusing animals that are getting away with a $100 fine. I want to create a special court, even if it's held once a week. I want a judge in that court that owns a pet, that understands animal abuse, and I want those people to go before that court and pay some strict penalties. I'm a pro-life candidate. I want to strengthen the security in our schools. I have a 10-point plan on my website. And all I can tell you is that when I'm your governor, I will give you straight talk. Like I've always done with you, Pat. You may not like what I have to say, but at least you know where I stand. I'm not one of these bubblegum politicians that always wants to please everybody, and I need to put my finger in the wind to see which way the wind is blowing before I give you an answer. Or take a survey, or go before a focus group and have the focus group tell me what I need to say in order to be on the right side of an issue. I don't care what the focus groups have to say. I'm going to tell it the way I see it.
Excellent. Joe, best of luck in the campaign.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you for having me on.
No,
Appreciate it.
It was great. Joe Trillo, independent candidate for governor, joining us tonight on the coalition. This will be actually up on Facebook, actually within probably seconds. If you'd like to revisit this, how can he reach you? It's
TrilloForGovernor.com. People want to volunteer. They want to put a sign on their lawn. Anything they want to do to help, we appreciate it. You can contact my office at 826-9100. You can request a sign, and we can actually have it delivered to you.
Right, via the growing fleet of the Trillo Navy, if you will. The Trillo Navy,
We have
Army,
several vehicles in
you
the
have
fleet.
air, land, sea.
Correct.
And you're regular habitués of downtown Providence, La Prom, late at night. Joe, thanks again for joining us, spending a good part of your evening here on a Friday night to talk to our crew here. Folks, we're going to take a quick break right now. We're going to try and get Billy Hunt. He's running for the General Assembly out on the East Bay. We're going to try and get him on the line in a few minutes. We are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Media Network here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center in the heart of the city we love. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course, Coalition Radio US. Stay tuned. We'll be back in just a few minutes. Thank you. And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network, here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center, 90 Way Boston Street, deep in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island, the naked city, the city of 1,000 stories. We continue to interview candidates tonight. Joining us in the last segment was, of course, independent candidate for governor, Joe Trillo. An hour and a half of memorable conversations as he and I actually, we've had fun now for about 15 years going at each other. Some days shaking hands, some days cursing each other, but ultimately we both want what's best for the state of Rhode Island. And we both share, in certain ways, a similar vision. Other ways we differ, but the conversation's always been great. Whether it be here on the Coalition, on WPRO, particularly on the Matt Allen Show, or once on a more memorable morning on the Lively Experiment with Jim Hummel. Someone very, very important to the future of the state of Rhode Island is joining me right now via the miracle of Skype telephone. He's been on the show once or twice before. You probably know him as Bill Hunt. He is also, again, a candidate for your General Assembly, District 68, here in the great state of Providence. Great state of Rhode Island. Bill, welcome back to the Coalition.
Yeah, thank you, Pat, for having me. I really appreciate it.
So let's, of course, as always, kind of kick off. One of the things that people always yell at me for is when you say the district and you don't talk about the towns and the communities. The East Bay has got a rather interesting geography in terms of its General Assembly districts in particular. What towns, what neighborhoods do you cover?
Yeah, certainly. So I'm from Warren, Rhode Island. The majority of the district is Bristol. We're primarily the northern west part of Bristol and the southwestern part of Warren. Mm-hmm. So I'd say about 2/3 of my district makes up Bristol, and the remaining third is Warren.
Right. Describe the neighborhoods, because the East Bay is really, I believe, I think one of Rhode Island's lesser known gems, particularly when you get into communities like Warren, which have such wonderful emerging art districts, and Bristol, of course, so famous for its 4th of July parade. But tell us about your neighborhoods and the people in them. What type of backgrounds and economic?
Certainly. For the people that don't know about the East Bay, I'd highly recommend coming to visit. Warren has a fantastic restaurant scene. My wife and I just had dinner at the Square Peg down in Warren, mm-hmm. and there's people coming from all over the state to visit the various restaurants. There's about 10 or 15 establishments in town that I would highly recommend. And it's really becoming a little incubator of, very unique restaurant scenes with high quality food, low prices. You're not paying the parking meters that you're paying in Providence. You get a great group of people. We sat at a community table with a couple from Barrington tonight. And it's just a very pleasant experience. District 68 itself is very blue-collar, middle-class, hard-working people. I've been walking the district since early this summer, and you get out and you knock on doors and you meet people, and we're talking about the type of people who go to work every day, they make a living, and they come home, and they're just trying to provide for themselves and their families. And like myself, a lot of them are fed up with the fiscal mismanagement of the state and the high taxes that the average everyday Rhode Islander has to pay.
Mm-hmm. What are some of the challenges of the East Bay? I know you've got property taxes are not inexpensive. You've got some wonderful schools, but what are some of the challenges or that folks in the East Bay face?
Well, a lot of the challenges are that people tend to forget about this part of the state a lot. They tend to forget about, Bristol County, Newport County. I mean, Little Compton is for all intents and purposes, Massachusetts. And I think a lot of the focus gets put on Providence, Pawtucket, Central Falls, Quonset to a lesser extent in terms when you're talking about business development. And a lot of the focus of our state government is to these major metropolitan areas. And to that whole line of thinking, a lot of the bedroom communities to Providence, like the East Bay, like Newport County, like the Boroughvilles in the northwestern part of the state, they tend to subsidize the fiscal mismanagement of the larger cities and towns in the state. And it's really to the detriment of the people of my district because we're funding the Providence school system, the Pawtucket school system, the Central Falls school system that is consistently failing. And we have our own unique and special challenges with the regionalized, one of the few regionalized school districts in the state between the Bristol-Warren school district. And, you know, it's like I said, it's one of those things that we would love to invest more time and energy into our own educational system. But, you know, when the way that the state is managed and the way that the funds are allocated, a lot of them go directly towards the major metropolitan areas.
It's disturbing because the way we fund municipal governments, the way we fund education, and this is me, and I love your reaction to this, we inoculate cities, particularly in the urban core, from their own financial irresponsibilities. You see very little demand and call for increased efficiencies in the urban core, yet in towns like Bristol and Warren and Cumberland, just to name a few, you know, they live with a daily reality of trying to do with less. What should happen in this state? Do we need to get away from funding to cities and towns? What would your approach be?
Well, like you're leading on to, you know, the budgets for the school districts. I mean, take Central Falls for example. 0% of their municipal budget goes towards funding their school. They're 100% funded by the state of Rhode Island, which means that they're funded by the other cities and towns. So not only as a resident of Bristol or Warren are you funding the Mount Hope Regional School District, but you're also funding the Central Falls School District, a percentage of the Providence School District, a percentage of the Pawtucket School District. And when you look at those school districts, we're not funding them and providing, you know, high quality education to the students in those districts. In fact, the test scores and the performance of those school districts rank towards the bottom of the entire state. You know, and it's really, it comes down, and the libertarian philosophy comes down to a real morality issue, because we are damning those students in those districts to that poor education because they don't have any choice in where they get their education from. There has been some progress in terms of charter schools, and we've seen some great successes in the state where, you know, multiple people are trying to enter into these charter schools, and there's a lottery system, in fact, in order to get into those charter schools to get the higher class of education. And what I would personally like to see is a voucher system where the dollars for the students themselves, they follow them wherever they go. And that would provide the ability for students in low-performing schools in the urban centers of our community or in our state to go to some of the higher-performing schools, and provide the mobility of those school dollars and a free market approach to education, where the schools that are performing well and the schools that can cater to the specific needs of the students get the funding they need to continue their good work. And the schools that are constantly underperforming, they can take those dollars and, you know, they would suffer the consequences, and, you know, it would be kind of a forced regionalization where the schools that are underperforming would be shut down because of the lack of interest in them.
Right.
And to take that point a step further, you know, opponents of that idea would say, well, the funding dollars are being taken away from those school districts that are underperforming. Well, you know, that's something to be said about that is, you know, those school districts aren't performing well to begin with, so why are we continuing to throw good money after bad?
Right.
Why not focus our efforts on the school districts that are performing well and get as many students enrolled in those school districts to provide the highest form of education for every student in the state of Rhode Island, not damning some to poor education and the privileged few get the benefit just because of the zip code that they live in.
Right. I mean, to answer or to ask and continue to pose one of your favorite questions, why? You know, why is our why we're doing this ultimately to perpetuate school systems, and are the clients and the customers, if you will, of the government, or are they in fact the customers and the clients, and the intended benefits supposed to be directed towards the students who need to walk out of there after 8 to 12 years with an education and able to compete in the marketplace at large? It strikes me, and I love your reaction to this, in this state, And again, there's a little rhetoric in here, but ultimately it seems like students are often a necessary inconvenience to create an environment where we continue to perpetuate these large bureaucracies that happen to occasionally perform as schools. It just seems like it's flipped upside down.
Well, working in the insurance industry and working with commercial businesses, the most successful businesses that I run into are the ones that have a specific focus of their business. It's a razor-thin positioning where they specialize in one type of industry.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why they are successful is because they are the experts in that one field. So we have a bunch right now, a current system of a bunch of generalist schools where they're trying to do everything for everyone and they're not doing any one thing very well. What I would love to see is those voucher programs be put into place and allow these schools to generalize. Not generalize, but allow these schools to specialize in certain fields, such as vocational programs, computer sciences, mechanical, woodworking, vocational programs that are going to provide people with the skills that they need to get real jobs when they turn 18, and not force every single student into the same path of going to a 2 or 4 year college and taking on a large portion of student debt before they actually can rely on getting a job that's going to help pay for their student loan debt.
Right. Yeah. No. It's as Gerald Gould, who's running for District 67, has pointed out, you've got towns that have, and we're talking about blue collar, middle class towns like Bristol, Warren, who've engaged in a high level of financial discipline, better than most, I should say, to do the physical improvements to the schools necessary to create an environment where learning can take place. And it's almost like we're penalizing those folks because we're asking them to not only pay for their own bills, but to then simultaneously pay for other people's bills. And there's only a couple of ways that can be reflected, and high property, fortunately, seems to be part of that. You ran 2 years ago. You did very, very well first time out. You're running aggressively again. I guess you're reacquainting yourself. You've been active in the community ever since, but you're really on an organic level reacquainting yourself with every street, every neighborhood. You're doing a lot of knocking on doors, aren't you?
Yeah, no, that's been the focus of my campaign. I feel that my biggest strength is one-on-one with the constituents of my district. And the feedback I'm getting is great when I'm knocking on doors and talking to the people of my district. And, the vast majority of people, they look at, the candidate that they're voting for, and they're voting for the individual, not necessarily the politics or any of the other stuff that goes along with it. And I think that what I bring to the table is a genuine candidate that honestly cares about the district and honestly cares about the problems of our state. That's a reflection on who I am as an individual and who I am as a professional. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a commercial insurance agent, and I deal with small businesses on a daily basis. And
Right.
I hear the struggles and the problems that arise on a daily basis for these people trying to run a business, trying to make payroll, trying to pay their insurance bill, trying to pay their taxes as a small business owners in the state. And collectively, small businesses are the largest employer in the state. They're larger than the state. They're larger than the hospitals. They're larger than any of the Hasbros or Amtrons or any of the other large corporations in the state. Those small business owners are the economic engine of the state. And I think that's who I'm really the voice of. Those are the people that I deal with on a daily basis. That's the mentality I want to bring to the State House. I want to keep them front of mind and make sure that we're fighting for those small businesses on a daily basis and making life easier for them.
It sounds like you would be an ideal candidate for the small business subcommittee that is part of the General Assembly and the structure. That day-to-day acquaintance, the ability to actually read a balance sheet, the ability to understand the market niches because you're intimately involved. The beautiful thing about being involved in insurance is, well, everyone needs it. And as a result, you're exposed to businesses of literally every variety, stripe, size, every market segment imaginable, given what you're doing on a daily basis. What, imagine if you will, you've got that, and this is a question so often asked of candidates, but I find it compelling even after all these years. You've got that magic touch. You walk into Halitosis Hall, Smith Hill, on the first day of the general legislative session. The seized part, the new speaker, whoever he or she should be, if in fact it's not current, Mr. Mattiello says, Bill, it's great to have you here. We've been waiting for a while to get a libertarian on board. Just give us your first 5 wishes, and they will be our command. What? Of course, I'm hallucinating at this point, but it's been a long day. But what would if you could break glass, add water, brighter brights, whiter whites, add that special seasoning, that special sauce, what would you do first?
Sure. So my number one priority, it's actually funny, as politically polar opposite as me and my opponent are, my number one priority would probably be the same as my opponent's priority. It would be to change the rules of the General Assembly and try to strip as much power as possible away from the Speaker himself or herself, whoever gets elected with this upcoming session. I mean, realistically, the way that the state government works right now is that the districts themselves aren't actually representatives to the districts. They're basically electors for the district, where the towns and the districts get together and they vote these representatives to the state house, and they don't really pass meaningful legislation. What they basically do is vote for who the next king or queen is going to be for the next legislative session, and they're the one that drives what legislation comes up for vote, what legislation gets held for further study, and what issues are going to be addressed in any given legislative session. So my first point of business would be to join with whatever coalition was willing to have the same message and influence that I would be looking for to strip that power away from the Speaker and give it back to the representatives that were elected to represent their district themselves. And that would be the number one thing, I think. If you get a group of people up there that can focus on that one effort, no matter what part of the political spectrum they fall on, I think that would be the most good anybody elected to that state house could do. After that, it really comes down to lowering taxes. That's been the pocketbook campaign that I've been running since I started my campaign 2 years ago. We need to lower taxes in the state. Rhode Island is an outlier. We have some of the highest tax burden, both on the personal and commercial side in the Northeast, let alone the entire country. And, on average, the median household income pays something like $8,700 a year in state and local taxes. And I like to ask people when I'm knocking on doors, what have you gotten for that $8,700 a year? What has made your life better where you said that, that's a great investment? I shared a post today on my Facebook page that the average American spends about $17,000 a year in state and federal taxes, and they only spend about $9,000 a year in food and clothing. So you're taking this huge need in the Maslow's hierarchy of need of clothing and food and the base of the pyramid, what people really need, and you're preventing them from purchasing that stuff and really benefiting their lives from the necessities by overly taxing people. So, that would be my number 2 thing. It would be, make sure the Speaker was in check, and then next thing, go at auditing the state budget and cutting down on spending and lowering taxes and putting that money back in the pockets of the Rhode Island taxpayer. Excellent.
What's next up on the list? What in your priorities?
Well, so fighting for small business, that's been the number 2 thing on my campaign. The business regulations. I hear stories about. I go into restaurants that I insure, and they have. It looks like a mural on their wall of licenses and inspections and everything that they need in order to open and operate a restaurant in the state, and it's laughable. And the sad part about it is that each one of those inspectors, they need to have certain licenses and fees that they need to pay in order to have their inspection licenses. So it's an exponential increase across the spectrum of businesses, where you have a business that doesn't have a boiler that needs to have a boiler inspection by a boiler inspector who needs to go to continuing education and be licensed to be a licensed boiler inspector, who then needs to go to a class that has an instructor who is licensed to instruct boiler inspections. And you think about how much of the economy and the wasted capital gets put into these programs, and it's insulting almost that you can't just have these businesses operate and let the free market work and let the money flow freely from services rendered, goods offered, and people willing to buy those services and goods. That is something that I think we need to get out of the way and just let the economy thrive and flourish. Going down the list, the next thing would be the line item veto. That's something that 44 other states in this country have, that Rhode Island hasn't implemented yet, which is very, very, very important for the power that the governor should have.
Right.
I had a very long conversation with a relative of mine who tends to fall on the other end of the political spectrum from me, and she wasn't very familiar with the line item veto, and she felt that it gave the governor too much power in their ability to veto legislation and stop things from going through. And when I explained to her that the way that most line item vetoes work is that even if the governor vetoes it, the General Assembly has the opportunity to vote up or down on it and override that veto with a 2/3 majority or whatever they come up with in the legislation. She was actually more apt to support the bill, because she realized that the legislators now, instead of saying, well, throwing their hands up in the air and say, I had to vote for the budget no matter how many bad things were in there, because what am I going to do, vote against the budget?
Right.
They now have the opportunity to vote up or down on specific line items in that budget, and they have to go back and face their constituents every 2 years during the election cycle and say, I voted for or against this specific budget item, and let the constituents know that and be able to decide whether or not that they want to support that candidate in the next election. And I think that would be a very good way of opening up the transparency of government and being able to see where your elected official stands on specific issues.
Right, because as it stands right now in Rhode Island, you can only judge a legislature by their thumbs up and thumbs down on the budget, and there's individual legislators, good men and women, who've faced the challenge in past years of actually getting part of the budget enacted, that something that they may have worked on literally for years, to either reform or to increase, and then face that terrible decision. Okay, that the rest of the budget literally stinks. I mean, it's rife with legislative giveaways and fat and pork and whatever cliche you want to apply. And should the budget be voted down? I think one year, a few years back in the Senate, they actually voted it down, much to the shock, if you will, and a little more than a little bit of awe of the members of the General Assembly. It's all or nothing, and it just seems ludicrous in a time when management of people in the dreaded private sector is increasingly sophisticated.
And to get back to the first point I made, a lot of these legislators have given up a lot of political capital to get those specific items in the budget that they need to have passed, that they've worked hard all legislative session to kiss the ring of the speaker to get those articles into the budget, that now that if they vote against the budget because, the 90% of it that they don't like and that 1% that they worked all session to get into the budget, it would be basically having an entire 6 months wasted for them. And, and they sometimes they have to weigh the good and the bad of the decision, and you can't hardly blame those legislators for making those decisions, but it comes back to, again, how the rules of the General Assembly are stacked against the individual legislators, and that's something that we need to go back to and reform the first day of the legislative session to make sure that the speaker doesn't have as much power as he has in the past. Right,
and I think in part and parcel of that is also this notion, and folks, if you're not familiar with it, I'm not sure if I recommend this or not, certainly not on a full stomach, but if you go for the last few days of the General Assembly, as I did this year, and camped out in my case because of the stadium bill, you will see something called the suspension of the rules. And that's not a good thing. The rules that they suspend are typically the few barriers, if you will, to outright legislative chaos, which is what we endure the last few days as we shoehorn in literally sometimes hundreds of pieces of legislation, which are discussed for moments at a time, which is almost always typically the case, bears unintended circumstances. So I think we also would agree that this whole notion that we're going to suspend the rules and how legislation is presented, that needs to die. That needs to die now. You know, the state, as we always say, and we said earlier in the show, Mr. Trillo, is a target-rich environment. The Commerce Corporation. What role do you see in a Bill Hunt-led government for the Commerce Corporation?
Well, in a Bill Hunt-led government, there wouldn't be a Commerce Corporation. I think the fact that the Economic Development Corporation needed to change their name because of the bad optics of the 38 Studio deal and rebrand themselves as the Commerce Corporation, no doubtedly with a huge budget for new logos and new marketing and a new website and everything else that goes along with that. That type of a department is doing nothing for the state except picking winners and losers, and is taking the tax dollars from hardworking small businesses in the state and giving it to special interests and people that have relationships with the government and the governor and the Commerce Corporation in general. And it really creates an uneven playing field. And like I said before, it picks winners and losers and prevents the free market from working as intended. And it really hurts all Rhode Islanders because, when you look at the facts and you look at the outcomes, because the intentions of these programs are well intended and they make sense, and who doesn't want economic development in the state? But when you look at the effect and the result of these types of programs, a vast majority of these organizations that get these benefits from the Commerce Corporation, they end up leaving the state. They end up losing the benefit of the tax incentives before the return is realized by the state of Rhode Island. And what it basically works out to is a bunch of giveaways to people who are politically connected to the elected leaders of the state. And I think that's wrong. So I think I would eliminate the Commerce Corporation and take their budget and use it to lower the corporate tax rate on a whole evenly across the entire playing field.
Right. I mentioned earlier to our earlier guest that the first thing you could do is do away with the corporate minimum tax. The notion that you're charging hundreds of dollars for corporations solely for the right to exist in literally as a piece of paper is ludicrous, and and it's so often with the government counterproductive, because I think of all these tiny businesses, some of them, essentially non-existing, but have been kept alive just because of the investment in legal fees in creating them, that simply decided to shut down in the wake of this at one point onerous $500 tax fee, just simply to exist. It's so often the unintended results grotesquely outweigh, that which was originally probably in at least some cases anyway, a heartfelt desire to do good.
It unfairly targets the people who play by the rules as well. I can tell you that the vast scope of businesses that I deal with on a daily basis, there are people that follow the letter of the law to the T, and they pay all the fines and fees and annual renewal fees that get applied to their businesses. And there's people that skirt the law, and they themselves benefit from the unfair competitive advantage of not having to follow the rules and the selective enforcement of those rules by our state government. And that's just that's another example of how overregulation creates an unfair playing field and prevents the free market from operating as intended.
Incredibly enough, a number of the progressives who are running in the East Bay are actually upset with the speaker and upset that the corporate welfare that would have been taking place in creating this stadium facility in Pawtucket didn't happen. That's the leap of logic there. I'm not even sure I comprehend it yet. What was your take? And I know that you testified aggressively, I believe down at URI. And, you know, you were part of a crew of libertarians who managed to cover every single hearing, every single public session. What was your take on the Pawtucket Red Sox Stadium?
Well, I testified. It was actually at Roger Williams University,
Right.
Where I testified against the bill. And you know, I deal with a lot of individuals that had vested interests in the Paw Sox staying in Rhode Island on a daily basis. The networking groups I work with and the business leaders that I deal with, they all have varying opinions about you know, the viability of the stadium and the benefit analysis of giving the taxpayer just dollars to fund a private enterprise. But you know, my position was very clear that, you know, just because this is the way things are done in other parts of the country doesn't mean that us as Rhode Islanders should be perpetuating this corporate welfare and perpetuating the idea that we're taking tax dollars from hardworking small business owners and giving them to millionaires and billionaires collectively to operate what comes out to a entertainment venue for something that is not benefiting the entire state, but only a select group of people who care about, you know, minor league professional baseball. You know, there's perfectly good examples of the way that tax dollars have been wasted. You know, the Providence Place Mall is a great example of the tax dollars and the incentive programs that were put in place to build the mall, you know, 20 years ago, back in the late 90s. And you look back on it, and all of those bonds and all of the borrowing and the funding to build that program were amortized out over 30 years plus. The owners of the Providence Place Mall, which has changed hands numerous times, are still benefiting from sales tax incentives where the payroll taxes and the sales taxes that they collect at the Providence Place Mall, they have a waiver where they don't actually have to pay that money to the state. That's just going into the pockets of the owners of the mall itself. And you look at a company like Amazon in comparison to the brick and mortar malls of the early 2000s, and you've seen the change in the marketplace where that 30-year mortgage, for lack of a better word, that was taken out on the Providence Place Mall, you know, it's 20 years later, and we still have 10 years on that note, and the mall is in decline.
Right.
They're talking about closing down portions of the J.C. Penney's and turning it into more parking for downtown Providence. The anchor stores in that mall are shutting down, and there's fewer and fewer, you know, small businesses that are starting up in that mall. They're all corporate businesses that aren't doing very well.
Right.
So when you take that and apply it to the building a brand new stadium, and take that funding for that stadium and you put it out over the next 30 years, what is baseball going to look like 20, 30 years down the road? The average age of a baseball fan is about 50 years old, 55 years old right now. Most people now, they don't go out to a game, they watch the highlights on their phone on YouTube. So, you know, to take that money and to mortgage the future of Rhode Island for the next 20 or 30 years and expect everybody in the state to be happy about it and be happy that their tax dollars are going to fund these millionaires and billionaires, I think was a fallacy that, you know, that the leaders of the state, thankfully, because of their ineptitude and their lack of leadership, caused the Paw Sox to find a better deal somewhere else. I think that we dodged a bullet there, and we really prevented ourselves from mortgaging our future for the next 20 or 30 years. So I think it's almost a blessing in disguise. As much as I love the Paw Sox, and as much as I love going to those games, and as much as the great memories I have growing up as a kid, I think, you know, we really dodged a bullet in having Worcester absorb that boondoggle, which is going to be the Woosocks for the next 30 years.
Yeah, and, it's astonishing when you look at the number of examples you made across industries. Government continues to invest long-term money, 20, 30, 40 years out, for technologies effectively in the form of marketplaces that have a shelf life now in this sort of hyper-changing economy that we live in, that often have a shelf life of maybe 10 or 15 years. The term in marketing, and the old term in marketing is eating your young. Well, that's occurring at every level of the marketplace these days, where essentially industries that were the taxi industry, the hotel industry, malls, real stalwarts of the construction economy, of the motor vehicle economy, of the overall consumer economy, don't exist in their current form as they did even 5 years ago. And 10 years from now, probably they'll be completely different. They may not even exist in the way that we see them now. And we've invested. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, you brought up a great example. Hotels. When was the last time you stayed in a 30-year-old hotel?
Yep.
The hotels change on a 5-10 year basis, where they go in and they remodel the entire place, and they rip out the entire lobby and they redesign the whole entire thing. What do you think is going to happen in 30 years when the note is finally paid off on the Paw Sox Stadium? What do you think is going to happen? They're going to be looking for a brand new stadium. We're going to start the whole entire circus all over again. So,
right.
It's almost better that, again, hopefully we can find some way to repurpose McCoy Stadium that's going to provide a future benefit to the city of Pawtucket. There's rumors and things that I've heard about both the McCoy Stadium site and the Apex site, which I think are better uses of the taxpayer dollars besides some type of entertainment venue. And I just hope that, Pawtucket has a lot of upside. There's a lot of potential. My office is based out of Pawtucket. I think that there's a lot of good that could happen in that city, and I wish them all the best. I just think that, as much as we wanted the Paw Sox to stay, as I said before, I think it was a blessing in disguise that, they ended up leaving, and we can find a better use to use that stadium for.
Right. No, I agree 100%. Obviously, you look at the disruptive economy. We could in Providence now, and unfortunately, and this is the frustrating part. Rhode Island seems to be perpetually find itself at the investing in the tail end of and I'll use it loosely term, a technology's lifespan. We built a mega mall when, as it turned out, there were only 10 or 20 years of mega malls left. We were going to build a baseball stadium when, in fact, the very face of entertainment, as we know it now, will not exist in probably 10 years. We continue to be, we invested, and I use the term invest loosely, by the way, we invested in a convention center, which is, nice people. I've had the opportunity to deal with them on a couple of different levels lately. Wonderful people, terrible business. And for all those who argue that it's, government needs to have those, I say just bundle it all up and sell it off. Hotels, right now, we've got this hotel construction boom going on downtown. I just, as you know, I went to the Libertarian National Convention in New Orleans, and a significant number of us stayed out in the community in Airbnbs, which, for all the hue and cry about Airbnbs, which I find bizarre, you had in New Orleans, post-Katrina, a significant repurposement and reinvestment in communities, taking these tiny houses, which had been virtually destroyed, neighborhoods virtually destroyed, and turned into productive investments with, large-scale construction money being poured by the private sector into these Airbnbs. I stayed at a one-bedroom home, which is typical if you've ever seen a picture of New Orleans. You have all these charming, funky little homes. I stayed in a one-bedroom home with a modern kitchen for $70 a night. Holy cow. That was literally half of what it would cost for me to stay in the nameless, faceless, corporate hotel. Instead, I stayed in the Garden District. I stayed in the heart of a community. Not a man of wealth, but I did spend locally in that community. So instead of the money going into the big corporate hotel and then leaving the state via the big corporate, pipeline, instead I spent money in local businesses and that money then stayed in the community. I mean, that's, to me, that's an economic development dream, dream. That's what we want here in Providence, isn't it?
It is, exactly. And to be honest with you, I hear stories all the time about communities that instead of focusing on reducing the regulations that drive up the cost of the regular brick and mortar hotels and motels in their community, they want to go ahead and implement more taxes and fees on the Airbnbs,
Right.
So that they have to stay in line with the hotels and motels in the area, so that it doesn't create an unfair advantage. And that just doesn't seem right to me. As a consumer and as a business owner, as a member of the community, why don't we, instead of increasing regulations to level the playing field, why don't we reduce regulations so that we can have a situation where people can make that choice and they can vote with their dollar. They can say to themselves, I can spend $70 a night to stay in a small house with a single bedroom and to have the amenities that the Airbnb provide, or I could take that $70 and spend it to stay in a larger hotel with room service and maid staff and all the other amenities that create employment and jobs in the state, and let people vote with their dollars instead of creating this idea that more regulation is the only way to level the playing field, because all that does is take the money out of the taxpayers' pocket and prevents people from going on vacation and investing that money back into the communities that they're visiting.
Right, and you raise a compelling question, because in my mind, the solution should never be to artificially increase the price of that economic disruptor that's creating innovation and lower cost alternatives to the consumer. The emphasis should be, for example, say in the case of taxis or hotels, let's take taxis for example, we understand that unfairly they were forced generations ago to buy perhaps a right to own a taxi. Well, let's not make Uber or Lyft as expensive as taxis. Let's find ways to make taxis, given the opportunity, to be price competitive with Ubers and Lyfts. And to wit, I've actually seen local taxi services in different communities across the country adopt, quite frankly, an app-based approach to using the local taxis. Holy cow! They didn't just, those taxi companies didn't collapse and have a collective nervous breakdown and cry, woe is me. They realized that they'd better change quickly or die. And so we should never, ever, ever look to increase taxes on one sector of the economy or to render them less competitive in order to weigh them down like the industry that they're currently taking over. It's along those same lines. I want your reaction to this. We constantly, whether it be casino gaming is a perfect example. Well, the state needs the revenue. Why do people root for the state to get more revenue? Can you explain that to me?
It doesn't make any sense at all. And to touch on your taxi cab point, I was recently down in Newport at a convention down there, and we left the Atlantic Resort Hotel in Middletown.
Nice.
And went down to downtown Newport. We took an Uber down to the bar, but as we were leaving the bar, we were finding difficulty getting an Uber to come pick us up to bring us back to Middletown. And lo and behold, I know it's crazy to think of in this day and age, but there was a taxi cab sitting out in front of the bar. So we said, well, hey, let's put our phones down and let's go hail this cab that's sitting out here ready to go instead of waiting for the Uber to show up.
Throwback.
And we got into the cab, and there was a very lovely lady that was driving the cab. She provided a fantastic value prop to us, saying that the cost of the taxi cab ride was going to be very comparable, if not less, than what the cost of the Uber ride was going to be. She handed us her business card and said, if you're ever in Newport and you ever need a ride, here's my card, here's my name, give me a call. I'd be happy to give you a ride and come pick you up and to help you out any way I can. And that left a great impression to me. And never in my life have I experienced, and I grew up in Newport well before the days of Uber, never in my life have I met a friendly taxi cab driver that was able to go above and beyond to offer the level of service that I received from this taxi cab driver that was waiting outside the bar when I left after a night of drinking with colleagues in the insurance industry. And what it does is this disruptor of the Ubers and the Lyfts, it's causing the taxi industry to step up their game and to offer a value prop that makes their product more compelling and and a better alternative to the Uber product. And
Right.
isn't that what the free market is all about? It's about choice and about being able to choose the product or service that best suits your needs and offers you with the best value for your dollar, and help in an equal exchange between you and the service provider where both parties are benefiting from the transaction. I mean, that's what the free market is all about, and that's my vision for the state for sure.
Right, and beautifully put. In a vibrant free market, the quality of people's lives improves. It costs less to get to say. I'll give a perfect example. A number of years ago, when Mayor Menino was running the ship in Boston, he used his political clout from preventing Walmart to open up a big box store. Now, for whatever reason, agree or disagree, there are those who have created this universal loathing for Walmart. Well, as I pointed out to a state senator at the time, how dare you? It may not fit your political narrative, but quite frankly, ask the single mom who's living in a tougher part of Boston, who's got an opportunity to get a gallon of milk for what it costs a quart of milk at a local bodega or a local tiny grocery store, and ask her how she feels about the politics of Walmart, and ask her how she feels about inclusionary growth or this or that. She's simply worried about getting the best value for her dollar so she can feed her children and send them to school content so they can learn. This notion that we're going to use social approval or disapprovals as a function of quote unquote approval in the marketplace is disgusting. It costs people's jobs, it affects people's lives, and typically the people who implement them, allow me to engage in a tiny bit of class warfare for a second here. Typically the people who are so, in favor of encouraging that type of economic stagnation are people who are not in a position to be affected by it. Quite frankly, they can usually, and I'll again, forgive the gross generalization, they can still afford their arugula at whole paycheck and get their organically grown coffee ground for them freshly at the local by the local barista. So what I find tragic about a state like Rhode Island is that contrary to the myth perpetrated by members of the progressive elite, the people who are most likely to gain from a true free market and a real free market are the people who often have the least amongst us. I wonder what you think about that.
Well, I'm one of those people who are blessed, financially, and I have a good paying job, and my wife is gainfully employed and has a very well paying job, and I don't take that the least bit for granted whatsoever. I count my blessings every day for the wonderful life that we have, to live in a great community like Warren, to own our house, to have the ability to even to complain about the idea of higher taxes and the other things that seem trivial to the people who are fighting to find out where the next meal is coming from, or how they're going to make their car payment or their rent payment. So I don't want to sit here and come from an elitist status and talk down on anyone, but quite frankly, I'm one of those people who don't necessarily agree with a lot of the economical positions that Walmart has in terms of the way they, overall treat their employees and that type of thing. But I don't go out and protest against Walmart. I don't go out and try to affect other people's, buying influences or where they go to get their gallon of milk. I vote with my dollar. I don't frequent Walmart. I go ahead and I spend my money at the local grocery stores in my local community. Tom's Market is a great example of a local convenience store here on the East Bay that I love to go to, that I love their level of service. I love the products that they have, and I'm willing to pay a premium to frequent that local grocery store as opposed to a large Walmart, for example.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, as you mentioned, the economics of a large corporation like Walmart has provided economic benefits to people in this country that any amount of government intervention could ever dream of providing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the low cost value of a gallon of milk or produce or meat or any type of you know, food item that you purchase from a Walmart or a large superstore, not to mention the other consumer goods, could never be offered by a large bureaucracy like the government, because the cost to run the entire bureaucracy would reduce all of those you know, economic gains by large purchases and, you know, trying to tell how the market is going to react to certain things. So, you know, as much as you know, again, like I said, I don't necessarily agree with Walmart in their economic positions. I'm not going to sit here in my ivory tower and tell people how they should spend their dollar. I'm just going to vote with my dollar and choose to frequent the local business. But if someone is in a different economic position and they see the benefit of frequenting a Walmart or a large corporation, big box store, whatever you want to call it, then God bless them. That's how the free market and the economy should work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a challenge. You know, you've unfortunately, I often refer to government as a true 1% because so many of these folks are inoculated, if you will, by accident or design from the effects of their own decisions, quite frankly. So some of the other issues that are bound to come up. You know, we've seen now the first implementation of the tolls. You know, the Department of Transportation is quite happy because toll revenues are, I guess, slightly in excess of what their original prognostications were. You know, the whole way that we finance road construction and issues like that in the state, it just seems, whether it be the $250 million in schools, whether it be the way we collect money in tolls, the way we bond things, it just seems like this state spends an inordinate amount of money, you know, effectively on how they get from point A to point B. Sometimes for the direct benefit of some of the power play it involves, other times just because of the inefficiency of the government. I mean, is it too late, do you think, at this point to unwind the tolls, or you know, what are your thoughts on that at this point?
Well, you know, it comes back to spending. So in a state that's roughly 1 million in population, we have a $9.6 billion budget. That means for every man, woman, and child in this state, we're spending $9,600 a year in state spending. That's not counting federal spending. That's all a state $9.6 billion budget. When you compare it to states of similar size of Rhode Island, I like to say New Hampshire, which has about 6 times the land mass and the same population, their budget is about $4.7 billion. So just about half of what we're paying here in Rhode Island. Mm-hmm. Delaware, who is roughly the same geographic area and has comparable population, theirs is about $4.3 billion a year. You know, Joe Trillo, who you just had on the radio not too long ago, he brought up a point in the debate last night about the DOT spending only 20% of their budget on actually fixing the roads and the bridges. And they said the $500 budget, I believe his figure was, and said only $100,000 went towards fixing the roads and bridges, and the other went to administrative and payroll and other costs to run the Department of Transportation. So I don't think it's necessarily a revenue problem when it comes to any of the problems in the state, including the roads and the bridges. It's a spending problem, and it's a matter of us going ahead and auditing the budget, figuring out where our tax dollars are going, and figuring out where they can be better spent, and creating greater efficiencies so that we can go ahead and make the government do the things that it's meant to do, and not trying to be all things to all people. Obviously, coming from a libertarian perspective, we want the government to be as small as possible, as unintrusive as possible, and to stay out of our lives as much as possible. But even in that extreme, there are some, roles that the government can get involved in. And I think instead of going ahead and trying to figure out more and more ways that the government should be involved in our lives, we should be finding more and more ways where we can get the government out of our lives and find better solutions, and let the government just focus on the bare bones blocking and tackling of running a state and running the country, and do that extremely well instead of trying to do so many different things poorly, because that's what we have right now. And we're not getting a lot of value for our tax dollars. We're not getting value for that, $9,600 that is spent for every man, woman, and child in this state.
Do you think the Ubers involved in rolling out UHIP, do you think it's a reflection of that same mentality?
Oh, it definitely is. That the UHIP program, and I don't like to toot my own horn, but it's on videotape. If you care to Google the League of Women Voters debate back 2 years ago, when I was debating in October at the Bristol Town Hall, and I was, my opening statement had to do specifically with the UHIP program and how much of a debacle it was 2 years ago. And you sit there and say to yourself, what has changed in the last 2 years? And, the governor was in the debate last night talking about how we've turned a corner and how claims are being paid, and things are getting better. But that 2-year period, we've lost so much and spent so much money on a failed computer system. And you say to yourself, well, why was this computer system put in place in the first place? And when it boils down to it, this computer system was put in place to help give taxpayer dollars to social programs. And while we can sit and discuss the merits of each individual social programs ad nauseum and whether or not they have merit or not, the bottom line is that we are spending $600 million ineffectively giving taxpayer money to states, to constituents, and we're doing a very poor job at it. And it's sickening to say that we've lost so much money trying to give that money away. Think about how much good and how many social programs we could have funded if we had taken that money and invested them directly into it instead of trying to find a streamlined way of giving that money out. And it's mind-boggling. It's really, there's no good way of describing how much of a disaster this whole UHIP rollout has been.
Right, and when you bundle up UHIP, the Department of Motor Vehicles, and even a couple of the IT situations surrounding the Secretary of State's office, it lends the question. I'll ask you the same question I asked Mr. Trillo, and I plan on asking everyone who's running for office. Should the state at some point in time understand that state government is not capable of competing at a high level in the IT marketplace and should find ways to outsource transactional IT environments? In an age of companies like Amazon and running the cloud, being able to engage in exponentially higher volumes of transactions, it just strikes me that companies like IBM, ADP, Amazon, Google, you name it, would be capable of creating a system like this almost out of pocket and just charging us on a transactional basis without us having to invest in something that government really has no need to invest in, which is becoming an IT magnet. And when you add all these things together, all these failed programs, we've spent $1 billion, that's a B, on failed information technology with no clear path that's ever going to change.
Well, this is a systemic problem, and it reaches beyond the technology, aspect. But I'll use that as a perfect example. Is you have middle-level government employees who are punching way above their weight class, negotiating with multinational companies like Deloitte who deal with these type of programs on a daily basis. And they are expected, these middle-level government employees are expected to know the intricacies of a complex IT contract and to be able to parse through that information and fight for the taxpayer to make sure that that is an ironclad contract and that we are getting exactly what we paid for. And the bottom line is that they are ill-equipped to do that, and that they should never be put in a position where they are forced to make those negotiations and to make those decisions.
Right.
And this goes ahead, and you can apply that same logic to the negotiations with public sector unions in our state. You can apply the same logic to people who are dealing with investments in our state, the state treasurer's office. These people who are using so much power and they are handling the taxpayers' dollars, and there's such large quantities of money that we're discussing, and they are expected to make these decisions. It's baffling. You have school committees that are negotiating school contracts, and these are some of the school committee elections. I feel for them. They are completely throwaway elections where people have no idea who they are electing to these school committees, and they're the ones that are making decisions over roughly 70% of most municipal budgets. And you say to yourself, how are we putting this much responsibility in underqualified hands?
Right.
And it goes back to the same thing I've been saying all night, is that the government is taking on too much responsibility. They're trying to be too many things to too many people, and we need to focus on the simple nuts and bolts things that they can handle, that's not going to cost the taxpayers a ton of money. And as you said, we should be outsourcing the complex issues and the IT and the other things in the state to the professionals to make sure that we're getting the best value for our taxpayer dollars.
Absolutely. And just to throw out there, before we wrap up, we've got the very real prospect now of the state bonding out hundreds of millions of dollars of construction for schools, whether it be brand new construction and or renovation of existing facilities, to be run by organizations, very often very well-meaning. I mean, there's some real citizen soldiers, real patriots in there. There's also a lot of people who are, looking to use their position of advantage, but they're looking to manage that process in a state government that, by and large, has been absolute failures at just about everything else on a similar scale that they've touched, and I think that's terrifying.
Well, most of those dollars, those bonding, they've already been earmarked for projects that are already in the works, that are already in the hopper. A good portion of that school bond referendum is going to go towards rebuilding the East Providence High School. I forget the other community that also is going to do a major repair of their school, but some number like 20% of that funding has already been earmarked for specific projects. So when you start chopping up these big pieces of the pie, and they're already in the hopper, they're already in the works, they're already going to happen anyway. It's scary to think that we're going to make such a big investment, and on par, the individual schools aren't going to get any better. They're going to kind of just get a coat of paint and a Band-Aid on the hatchet wounds. It seems like a big number, and it's going to create a big difference in these school systems. But the truth of the matter is that I don't see that this amount of spending is going to be nearly close to what is needed, and is really just a temporary measure as opposed to a solution to the problems that we have with the schools in our state.
Wow. We've got ourselves a situation here, don't we? Billy, first of all, thank you for spending a significant part of your Friday evening with us here on the Coalition. This will be up on the facebook.com/Coalition Radio instantly as soon as we're done with the show. And people, if you missed part of this and you want to do the little bit of a rewind, you can, and then we'll get it out to YouTube. But Billy, where can folks where can folks find out more about you, and where can they find you in the coming weeks, and just kind of give folks a snapshot of how they can reach out to you, whether they live in 67 or not.
Sure, it's District 68. But,
68, I'm sorry.
If you go to my website, which is www.hopewithhunt, that's HOPE with hunt.com, you will see a detailed description of all of the issues that I'm running on, with a good description about each one of those positions and how I think I have a solution to affect change in the state. I also do a pretty decent job of keeping up to date with all of the political statements that I'm writing for the local paper, the East Bay newspapers, the Bristol Phoenix and the Warren Times Gazette. I have those articles posted on the website, so people can check those out if they want to see specific issues that I'm talking about on a weekly basis. I will be having my fundraiser at Federal Hill House of Pizza in Warren, Federal Hill Pizza on Main Street. It'll be on October 11th. It starts at 6 o'clock till 9 o'clock. We'll have some pizza, and you'll get to meet me and some of the other local candidates in the district, and meet some of the constituents that come out. And if you're really looking to get a hold of me over the next coming weeks, make sure you go and check the streets of Bristol and Warren, because most of my weekends have been filled directly towards knocking on doors and meeting constituents. I'm averaging approximately 300 houses a weekend, meeting people in the district and talking about the issues that are important to them, and telling them my vision for the future of District 68. So if you're out and about in Bristol and you hear your doorbell ring, please answer. Don't pretend like you're not home, because it's probably me knocking on the door. And I don't want to intrude. I just want to tell you a little bit about the libertarian philosophy and how my vision for a better Rhode Island over the next 2 years when I get elected.
Wonderfully said. Bill Hunt, he's running for General Assembly, District 68 out on the East Bay. Again, I've had the opportunity once or twice to walk, or I should say jog alongside with you. You keep up one hell of a pace. You've got a hell of a story. You're a local guy who's got a tremendous personal investment in the community, both through business, home, family, education, and really you've got a compelling story to tell and a compelling perspective on what needs to be done. And ultimately, it's all about the people of Rhode Island, bringing government back to them. It sounds so cliched, yet, but when you hear Billy lay it out, step by step, what has to be done. Clearly, this was no quick overnight study. Billy's been focusing on this for years. And again, the libertarian philosophy, as we like to say, emphasizes the ultimate rights. That's the rights of the individual. And regardless of who or where or what that individual came from, whatever lifestyle they pursue, it's all about maintaining the individual rights of the folks. So folks, give Billy a listen, and particularly, whether you be in 67 or 68, or there's a number of great independent legislators running this time, if you want change, it's simply not good enough anymore to call up talk radio. It's simply not good anymore to sit on a keyboard and bang away, although that can be entertaining and sometimes that can be more than a little cathartic. What folks need to do this election is get up, get involved, and find candidates that support your perspective. And you need to support them and be involved in their campaign. If not, it's not simply good enough to complain anymore. So, Bill, best of luck. You and I will be talking over the next day or so. And again, the streets of the East Bay are alive with the revolution right now, and it starts with you. So thank you very, very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Pat. I really appreciate it.
All right, have a great night. Folks, I'm going to sign off in a minute or two, but just to kind of reflect back on tonight's conversation. First, of course, Joe Trillo. Everybody knows Joe. And I've got a long and rewarding history of conversation and debating Joe. I like Joe. He and I don't nearly agree on everything, but I think he's got a tremendous amount to offer the state of Rhode Island. He's got a fascinating perspective, and he's quite frankly, the institutional knowledge regarding the state of Rhode Island is something to be taken very, very seriously. Take a moment, look at his campaign, move past the conversation about independent versus Republican versus, move past the fundraising, move past these issues, and get to the heart of the matter. We ask you to do that in the primary. We ask you to do that in the general election. You'll make your own decisions. As a libertarian, I trust you to make the decision that works, that's most for you. But ultimately, don't let the laziness of the general media take any of these General Assembly elections, or as importantly, the treasurership, the attorney general, the governorship. Don't let them dumb it down. My understanding is that the viewership for last night's debates between the three principal candidates running for governor, nearly record-breaking. Channel 12 does a wonderful job. I do want to register my disappointment with Channel 12, and actually I should say the Next Star people, not Channel 12 locally. They don't need me to say this, but there are fine journalists working very hard at Channel 12. I continue to be frustrated by the exclusion of some great independent candidates, whether it be the Moderate Party, Dr. Munoz, even my special friend Ann. By the work that they've invested, they've earned the right to be heard. They are ballot candidates for the governorship of the state of Rhode Island. And I challenge everyone who listens to this show to find a forum, whether it be online, in person, to make an extra effort. Support their candidatureships, not necessarily in a vote. That's ultimately your choice. But support the, if you will, the legitimacy of their candidatureships by giving them a listen. Read their positions, understand them, question them, challenge them, but at the same time, take them seriously. Quite frankly, they've earned that right. And I hope to have all of them on the show in the coming weeks. Folks, we are the coalition. As always, we are loud and proud. Tonight, I was very proud to be completely Kavanaugh outrage porn free. Again, to reflect on the Kavanaugh situation, I do not diminish one bit, as a father of two daughters, the complaints issued by individuals challenging Mr. Kavanaugh. They need to be thoroughly investigated on an arm's length basis before the conversation about his status as a Supreme Court nominee goes forward. To do anything less than that is a disservice to all of us, men and women, and quite frankly, delegitimizes the process. On a secondary level, I object to Mr. Kavanaugh's Supreme Court nomination, mainly because of his approval of some difficult, I think, injurious portions of the Patriot Act and his lack of support of the Fourth Amendment. Those are the kind of questions I think we need to be getting back to. Once, and only once, these other issues have been thoroughly investigated. We are the coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media, broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Network here at the GoLocal Live Broadcast Center in the heart of the city we love, Providence, Rhode Island. Facebook.com/The Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_Radio, the mothership at Coalition Radio.us, and as always, as we monitor from afar, the Woo Sox, the all apolitical anti-billionaire baseball boys club Twitter feed at Pawtucket is home. Folks, you have a number of places that you can spend your Friday evening or time during the week as you surf the web and listen to debate and conversation. We're always thrilled that you take a few moments of your time to do ours. If you could follow us on any of the sites, it'd be helpful, but understand that throughout this election process, we will be your home for the issues. We'll see you next week.